Ladies and gentlemen, I know most of you are here for Representative Regenberg's bill H5364. I have approximately 150 people who have signed up to testify. Now, I have a timer, and I generally have never used a timer, although I will use a timer if we have to. The way this bill is going to work is the sponsor will speak. Representative Regenberg will speak first, so welcome and come forward, please. And then I will suggest that we have one member from the opposition, so to speak, who's against the bill to speak. I'll give you both basically unlimited time, and then all the witnesses after that, I would ask you to limit your testimony to 2 minutes. Times 153, you can figure it out. It'll be here a long night. Now, some people have signed up and want their position noted for or against without testimony, and I'll appreciate that, and I'll read that into the record. If someone has left and they want to submit, or even someone who has testified leaves after they testify wants to submit written testimony, we welcome that. That's another reason why we hold these bills for further study, so that we have an opportunity to get written testimony post-hearing. So Representative Regenberg, you'll be first, and then I'm going to call people up in 3 so we can keep the hearing moving. And then I'm going to hear from Billy Casellas. He'll come up as Con, and both of you will have as much time as the committee wants to give you. And then, thank you, we'll go from there. We'll go through the witness list as people have signed up in order. Welcome to House Labor again, Representative Regenberg. Nice to see you.
Thank you, Chairman Shekarchi and members of the committee. I promise one of these days I will come out with a bill that will not keep you here all night. I promise.
And you're more than welcome to bring any bill you want before this committee. We welcome you here, and we always appreciate your passion.
Thank you, Chairman. So House Bill 5364 would raise the tipped minimum wage in Rhode Island for the first time in nearly 20 years. For some historical context, in 1996, the regular minimum wage in Rhode Island was $4.45 per hour, and the tip minimum wage was $2.89 per hour. Today, nearly 20 years later, the regular minimum wage is $9 an hour, and the tipped minimum wage is still just $2.89 an hour. What that means is that a tip is no longer a way to say to your server, thanks for the great service. It is now paying your server's base salary. And that has translated to real hardships for a lot of Rhode Islanders. While we've all heard a story about a bartender who might, make hundreds and hundreds of dollars on a really busy night, we know that this is not the norm. The norm for many tipped workers is frequent instability and economic insecurity. According to the most recent Bureau of Labor Statistics report, the average hourly wage, including gratuities for tipped servers in Rhode Island, was $8.90. Tipped workers have higher poverty rates and are twice as likely to be on food stamps as non-tipped workers in our state. That's the reality. And that's why I introduced House Bill 5364 to provide a measure of added security for thousands of hardworking Rhode Islanders by gradually raising the sub-minimum wage, beginning with a bump to $4.50 in 2016 until it's even with the regular minimum wage, giving a many-year window for businesses to adapt and adjust. Speaking of businesses, I recognize there is a lot of opposition from sectors of the restaurant industry to raising the sub-minimum wage by even a cent. And I don't blame folks for their opposition. Currently, they've got a really good deal, $2.89. It makes sense that some folks wouldn't want to see it changed. But that doesn't mean that what we have now is a good public policy. And while many restaurants do have thin profit margins, and I'm sure we'll hear about that tonight, according to a recent study by Forbes, the restaurant industry is not even on the list of the 15 U.S. industries with the lowest profit margins, all of which have to pay their employees at least the regular minimum wage. The truth is, Rhode Island is trailing our neighbors on this issue. We have the lowest tip minimum wage of any state in New England. Connecticut's sub-minimum wage is $5.69 for servers and $7.39 for bartenders. Last time I checked, Connecticut's restaurant industry was doing great. New York raised their sub-minimum wage to $7.50 for tipped workers. And while you might say that New York City is in a whole other economic league than Rhode Island, this is New York State. We're talking about Rochester, Poughkeepsie, Syracuse, places that are economically very comparable to Rhode Island. Now, I would argue that Rhode Island entrepreneurs are second to none. If business owners in our region can adjust to an increased sub-minimum wage, why would we think that restaurateurs in Rhode Island are any less capable of adjusting to an even more gradual change? And that is saying nothing of the 7 states across the country that have completely eliminated their sub-minimum wage and have just one minimum wage for all workers. These states have a higher or as high industry and job growth rates as sub-minimum wage states. I want to repeat that. I think it's important. The states that have eliminated completely their sub-minimum wage have as high or higher industry and job growth rates as sub-minimum wage states. And as I've heard concern from some of you about whether this would impact tipping, it's worthwhile to note that these states also have as high average tipping rates as sub-minimum wage states, as the vast majority of people already assume that servers make the regular minimum wage, so raising it doesn't impact people's tipping habits. Finally, these states all share significantly lower poverty rates among their tipped workers than sub-minimum wage states like Rhode Island. So raising the tip minimum wage is clearly a win for workers, and there is a tremendous amount of real-world evidence that it can also be a win for businesses. But it goes beyond that. This legislation is also a win for the economy and for our state. When a server's wage goes up, that means they can spend more, and we know that that extra money is going to go right back into Rhode Island businesses, particularly restaurants. An analysis by the Restaurant Opportunity Center found that this legislation would have anywhere from $64 to $130 million in stimulative effect for the state economy. Moreover, this legislation may very well save the taxpayers money, as tip workers in Rhode Island receive $638,000 in food stamps every month, because we have created a system in which the person who serves you your dinner may very well not be able to keep food on her own table. That's not right. In short, I believe this legislation is a win-win-win. After 20 years, it's past time for us to have this conversation, and I thank you all for giving this issue the consideration it deserves. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative. Does any members of the committee have any questions for Representative Regenberg? Representative Vice Chair Palangio.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Representative, you mentioned some statistics in reference to what the minimum wage was. How long ago did you say?
So 1996 was the last time there was any movement.
So in 96, the difference between minimum wage and the tipped minimum wage was what? Minimum wage was what in 1996?
For something.
The regular minimum wage was $4.45. The tip minimum wage was $2.89. So I guess about 2/3.
So would you have objection to making that same spread between the tip minimum wage and the minimum wage? Make that same spread today. So if it was 2/3 of $9.
So the legislation that I submitted, it's designed to have a gradual phase in, and the reason was for businesses to have time to adapt and adjust. Personally, I think that there's a great deal of evidence that eliminating the sub-minimum wage completely leads to the best outcomes for workers and potentially for businesses as well, referencing those industry growth rates. Having said that, I am, as you know, always open to conversation with all of our colleagues to find what is the policy and the specifics that make the most sense and that we think are the best for Rhode Island.
Was that the last time, 96, was that the last time tip minimum wage was addressed?
That's right. It has not moved since 1996, almost 20 years. I was 6 years old the last time the tip minimum wage was moved.
I was like 7.5.
I won't tell you how old I was.
Thank you.
Thank you. Representative Nunes has a question for you.
Thank you, Chairman. I just have a question about the method with which you increase over the 4 years. Is there any rhyme or reason to the percentage of increases over the 4 years? I mean, I just ran the numbers quick, and you have, in the first year, it's a 57% increase. The second year, it would be a 33%, and then it's a 25, and then a 20. So, I see how you get up to the $9, but it seems like the first year in particular, you have a substantial jump, and then it kind of peters off after that. Was there any thought? I'm sure there was, but can you explain how you came to the increases, how you did?
So the thinking for the sort of phase was not so much percentages as just the numbers. So the first year, so it's about $1. It's $1.50 a year. The first year it's a little more, just to have the even number up to $4.50, and then it's $1.50 every year. And there's been, and I don't have the name, but I can find it and email it to you.
Yes.
There's been a study by an economist out west that was looking at what is the number that sort of you can reasonably assume the businesses can adjust to that wouldn't be a shock to the system, and it's around $1.50 per year. So that was the logic.
Thank you.
Thank you. Representative Giarrusso.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Representative, I see you did a lot of research. I'm just wondering, was there ever any research as to how this would impact? Like, this could be a thing that cuts both ways. I'm sure that I'm not in the restaurant business. I would never do that to myself, but and I commend anyone that is, because I'm married to a woman, not to a business. But anyway, if you're increasing somebody's cost,
Absolutely.
they're gonna have to increase their prices. So a check that might be $100 might go to, I don't know, 110, 115. So now if they're going to get a 15 or 20% tip, that's going to be compounded. But that's the first question, if there was research on that. And the other thing is, since 1996, the minimum wage stayed the same. But has anyone checked to see how much a typical dinner for two costed in 1996 versus now? Because if that went up by twice as much, then 15% is going to be twice as much on today's bill for a dinner for two.
Okay, so to the first question. Sorry, remind me just one word to remind.
If there was a lot of research done to see what the impact would be on the business and how much they'd have to raise their prices.
So obviously, I can't foretell exactly what will happen in Rhode Island, but there is a lot of research that we did about what has happened in the other states that have either raised their sub-minimum wage or, as I mentioned, the 7 states that have completely eliminated. Those 7 states do not have higher average menu prices than sub-minimum wage states, and I think we can sort of test it. We can drive over the border into Connecticut. And go to sort of an equivalent type restaurant that they have here and see, again, their sub-minimum wage is a little less than double for servers and more than that for bartenders. And to my knowledge and in my experience, I don't see a big jump in prices when you cross the border into Connecticut. The second question, sorry.
The increase in prices from a typical dinner for two,
Right.
what it was in '96 versus now.
I don't have those numbers, but I know that, again, from having talked to a whole bunch of people now over the last several months who've been reaching out on this issue, I think one of the biggest issues, and probably what we'll hear some of tonight, is people struggling with the instability. If you're relying entirely on tips to make your living, because the $289 goes out all in taxes, so you really, it's entirely tips. There's no stability, and you could get a good tipper or like a big meal, or you could not, and there's no way to know. And so for people to budget, for people to raise families on that, it's really difficult. And I think the numbers that I talked about as far as food stamps, et cetera, sort of bear that out.
Thank you.
Thanks for reminding me.
Any more questions for Representative? Thank you. We're going to hear from the restaurant industry now, from Angelo's Palace. Am I correct? Angelo's Palace Pizza. Welcome, Bill. I'm also, at this time, you can stay if you want, I'm going to call for Representative Tanzi. I don't know if she's outside waiting. She had approached me before, and she wanted to speak toward the beginning of the hearing. She had another committee to go to. So if Representative Tanzi is here, she's more than welcome to come forward now, and then we'll start through the list. I'm also going to take a break after Bill speaks. There's one speaker who was late coming up here for the E-Verify. I'm going to give him 1 minute. Because I called you 3 times, and I just want to let you know. Not paying attention, but that's okay. Thank you. Bill, welcome to House Labor.
Thanks for having me, Mr. Chairman. Members of the committee, thank you for having me. My name is Bill Katsilas. I own Angel's Palace Pizza in Cumberland, Rhode Island. Push the button. Good. I own Angel's Palace Pizza in Cumberland, Rhode Island with my mother and sister. My mom's here to support me today. Hi, Mom. That's right. My parents started the pizza restaurant in 1978. They were immigrants from Greece. They worked a ridiculous amount of hours. I think at one point my mother went 17 years without a vacation. My sister and I were working outside of the restaurant business about 9 years ago in corporate America, and we both kind of came to the realization that, you know, though it might have paid well, it wasn't that much fun. We didn't get that intrinsic enjoyment out of the restaurant. So we, with the help of the SBA and about $1.5 million in financing, we worked with my mom, and we took a 4-booth pizzeria and turned it into a full-service restaurant. And we went from 11 employees to 75. And you want to know when we did this? 2008. Signed up for $1.5 million in debt when my mother was close towards the end of her career, but we can't tell her that. And we took a risk because we were in an industry we loved. And out of those 75 employees right now, about 30 to 35 of them are tip wage employees. And one thing I want to say, by the way, is I'm a little nervous because I have over 200 people here from the restaurant industry, fellow owners, employees, servers, bartenders, you name it. So I kind of feel responsible for whatever might happen here since they're all here. So they're in the other rooms, and thanks, guys, for coming. With that said, my tipped employees, servers, bartenders, and bussers, are some of the highest paid employees in my family's business. And it's always a challenge to make sure that we're paying the cooks enough to balance out how much money the servers are making. And in my restaurant, and we're a casual dining concept, we're not this high-end place, we're not a McDonald's. My servers make between $15 to $25 an hour, depending on the shift and their experience level and other factors. And another misconception, what concerns me most is that this statute, the way it's proposed, fundamentally threatens that entire system. This is the one system, if you think about it, if you think about the employer-employee relationship, this is the system of the tipping, the 20% tipping, which it comes out to on average, between the employer and the employee. It's the one system, and not the one, but it's a major system where the interests of the employer and the employee are almost 100% aligned. You know, if you have a well-maintained restaurant, if you give good service and you have good food coming out of the kitchen and the servers give great service, they get tipped. A lot of times when they have their regulars, it's a lot more than 20%. And sometimes some people don't tip well. It happens. But on average, they're making $15 to $25 an hour at my restaurant. And I think it's important to state that. There's another important thing that I think isn't mentioned often. If a server worked for 20 hours at my restaurant at $2.89 an hour and no one left her a tip, what happens at the end of the week? We have to pay the difference. Servers and bartenders and tipped employees by federal and state law are already guaranteed minimum wage. And once in a while, we might have a server that's training, but we pay minimum wage, but they're new on the floor and they don't make quite enough tips. We pay the difference. And you slowly see them bump up $11, $12, $15 an hour in tips on average. It happens. So I think there's a lot of misconceptions. I think there were some great questions asked by Representative Garusu. Jerusalem, sorry. I'm Greek, so you got to bear with me. The servers have been protected from the bump up from this to $289 an hour to $289 an hour now because of price increases in menus. It's just a fact of the matter. If they hadn't been protected, they'd be seeking positions in other parts of the restaurant. And there's many times where I ask servers, would you like to manage? No way. I make too much money serving. I'm not moving over to manage your restaurant. Thanks, but no thanks. I don't care what you pay me. I like the flexibility. I like the hours. And I understand that, and that's fine. And they're great employees, and we stay with it. Another thing is this $1.50 increase that's represented a year will cost my business, will cost me in payroll about another $50,000 to $60,000 a year to pick up those hours. It's $50,000, $60,000 a year. I probably have to raise prices to pick up that one increase, but it doesn't stop there. It keeps going. Here's another $150. Here's another $150. Then it's tied into minimum wage. We'd have to. It ties into. It's a significant bump up, and I'm in a pizzeria. I'm a pizzeria that has takeout and delivery. I can't raise my prices on takeout and delivery to try to offset that price of the tip wage. I can't do it. I won't be able to compete with the Domino's. I won't be able to compete with the other. I should have stuck to my mom's pizzeria of just 4 tables. Won't be able to compete with them. I have 75 employees. There's a lot, and there's studies out there, particularly from the Employee Policies Institute. This current legislation for the state of Rhode Island will result in either 1,278 to 3,409 loss of full-service industry jobs. And a lot of the studies cited today, they mix in full-service restaurants by the opposition and quick-service restaurants. 2 different animals. 2 different sides. If you back out the statistics, if you back out that type of stuff, the effect that this has on a full-service industry is it's significant. It fundamentally changes the dynamic where the employee is almost a partner in your business, the server and the bartender. The better your sales are, the better their sales are, we both make money. The kitchen doesn't get anything extra when we're really busy. You know, once in a while we'll give them a couple extra bonuses here and there to help because of their hard work, but they're stuck on the hourly wage. Our servers are almost like entrepreneurs with us, without having to pay for the overhead, without having to build the building or deal with any of the problems. They come in, they do their job, they make their money, and they go. I think it's a great system. The hospitality industry and the full-service restaurant industry, it's one of the crown jewels of the state of Rhode Island. I mean, we're nationally recognized for our great restaurants. It's a huge factor in bringing in tourism to this state. I think it's a competitive advantage we have right now. I think this proposed legislation and increasing the cost of doing business will have an effect on jobs. And right now, we're always ranking in the 5th worst in the country on unemployment. I don't know why we would tinker with something that's working. I'd also like to point out that all the tips that are declared, and in Rhode Island for tip employees, it's about $13 an hour, that employers pay employment taxes on all of that. I know the committee members know this, but I think it's important for the public to understand that. We already pay employment taxes on this. I don't see how increasing the tip wage will do anything to really help the situation of Rhode Island and the service industry when it's going to disproportionately affect them. I already know that if this legislation were to go through, I would have to significantly change how I operate and do business. And one of those things, as a business guy, and I hate doing it, I always like to try to circle the wagons as much as possible, is you're going to cut back on the level of your help. Instead of bussers, maybe you get rid of the bussers. Instead of one extra server on, get rid of them. And one thing I'd like to point out, what's fascinating, and my servers tell me this all the time, they get concerned because if you overstaff sometimes, like, oh, and we work with that, we're cognizant of that. You don't want to overstaff and not have them make money. I'm always asking, how much did you make? Did you guys do it right? Did we do it right? Okay, good. But a lot of times there's this theory, well, if there's less servers on, we'll make more money. And every time we do that, they make less because the service isn't as good. And they can't spend the time upselling their table. There's an art to this. And this statute fundamentally wipes that out. And I think it's bad for Rhode Island. I think it's bad for my employees. And I think it's bad for the restaurant industry. That's all I have to say right now.
Thank you. Vice Chairman Palangio first, and then Representative Giarrusso.
Thank you, Bill. Thank you for coming up here and
For
testifying.
having me.
And we welcome your mother here as well.
Thank her for having me too.
So minimum wage, as you probably know, is $9 an hour, and tip minimum wage is $2.89. In your opinion, is $2.89 too much? I mean, should it be $1.89 or should it be? I mean, I'm just curious your opinion.
Well, my opinion on that is that
Should we not have one at all? And I'm just, you're in the industry.
I mean, I'm responsible for paying the $9 no matter what happens, if they don't make it or not. I think $2.89 is a floor. I think we built our business models on this tip wage system. When we went to the bank and you have to tell them how you're going to pay them back, we all developed these models. So I don't think it should be zero. I think currently where we're at right now, coming out of the Great Recession and looking what other states have done, i.e. Massachusetts, which was below us throughout the entire Great Recession at $2.63 an hour, and we were at $2.89 an hour, we didn't see an increase in business because we were at $2.89 an hour. We didn't see an increase in employment because we were at $2.89 an hour versus $2.63 in Massachusetts. I just know I've looked at these studies, I look at the numbers. When I raise prices at a casual dining restaurant, I lose customers over time. It happens slightly. When the gas prices go down, my sales go up. When the prices go up, they come down a little.
It's like I understand what you're saying, but it's almost like a vicious circle that if perhaps the employees made more money, you'd have more customers because those are the type of folks that come back and eat at casual dining. I mean,
Possibly.
I mean, I represent a working class community,
Yep.
and the more disposable income they have, the more money they spend. They don't buy condos out of state, or they spend it right in the community. It goes right back into the community. And I guess the point I'm trying to make is, initial point was, do you think it should be increased at all or ever be increased, or do you think the customer and the server it'll kind of reach its happy medium wherever that may be?
I think a couple of things. I think when you look at our neighbors, you look at much stronger economies. And I didn't want to come up here and say Rhode Island's economy is terrible. Like I kind of want us to be positive about where we're going as an industry, because I mean, the better people feel about the state, the more chances we are going to be more competitive. I can't say it should never go up ever. I don't think that's an honest answer. I just don't think the time to go up is right now, and I don't think the bill in front of us should be considered at all. I mean, I think it's very aggressive. I think it fundamentally changes the way we do business, and I think overall it's worse for tipped employees. And if you look at the Employment Policies Institute study, it backs that up with quantitative data. Any increase will be a reduction in jobs at this point, and I just think at this time we should tread lightly. It's my personal opinion.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Representative Giarrusso, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I actually have three very short questions. And seeing how many people have signed up to testify on both sides of this argument, I'm anticipating that we're going to hear, just how bad these jobs are and all that stuff. So with that said, what's your turnover rate? I mean, do your employees leave all the time? Or?
Some leave to go to college, then they come back in the summer. My turnover rate in the front of the house is very low because we have a busy restaurant and we do things right. We help train our employees. They go through a substantial training period at minimum wage. We have manuals and tests to help them succeed. And we run a respectful operation. And what happens is I think a lot of times turnover rate happens when you have people aren't making money. Because if you go on Craigslist and you look how many restaurants are out there hiring, there's a lot of people hiring. People have trouble getting help a lot of times. We're fortunate enough that we don't have that issue because I think our reputation precedes ourselves. Like, you're going to make good money. You're not going to make the Capitol Grill money. You're not going to make the Federal Hill money. But we're also we close at 10 o'clock. You don't have to stay till 12 o'clock at night. So there's a trade-off. So my turnover rate is low. That's my answer.
Right. Well, that was my point, because I know you can associate turnover rate with a happy employee or somebody because if they're not making money at your place, they're just going to leave and they're going to go somewhere else. So that's really the basis of my question. The other question is, you almost answered it when you said they go off to college. Of most of your employees that would pertain to this bill, how many of them are the breadwinner of the family?
Breadwinner of my front of the house staff, I'm maybe less than 5%.
Okay, and one more question. If this was to be enacted, how would it impact you? Would you have to lay off some staff? Because, as a business person, I do get it that if it's probably not a big deal to have an extra 10 waiters or waitresses if you're only paying $2.89 an hour on a slow night. But if you're paying them if you're paying them a lot more, then you're going to probably have half that staff.
Well, but yes and no, right? I think two things happen. You go to $9 an hour, and you start, and it's weird. The time tracks up. It sounds like, oh, it's just $9 an hour. It adds up. So what happens is, I have to charge for that. So you charge for that, the prices go way up, 10%, 20% higher. Then customers are in the habit of tipping on top of that 20%, and they usually tip on the after sales tax price nowadays, which is, I think, very noble of people to do that. We charge the 8%, with, by the way, highest sales tax of any industry in the state, to point out. And people tip on that bottom line most of the time. 9 out of 10 customers tip at that bottom line. So what would happen, I think, two things would happen. I jack up prices for my dining room, or have some sort of surcharge to pay for increased charges, and I don't do it for my takeout and delivery. Less people come inside the restaurant. If less people come in, I inherently need less service. I maybe have to cut someone in the kitchen, because I don't need that extra body on a Friday night, extra 3 or 4 people to make it happen. And the staff understands that. I think I just know where I'm at, and I know the price sensitivity, and I know when we talk about setting up specials that we're capped at a certain amount, or they won't sell on the weekends, and those are the nights that people are looking to spend money. And I know I still got to run a dinner for 2 on Mondays and Tuesdays at $32.99 to get people in the door on a Monday and Tuesday with a bottle of wine, 2 salads, 2 entrees, and dessert. I think it's a pretty good deal, and I hope that my customers tend to be a little more generous when they know they're getting that deal with that staff, and the servers are happy because I'm getting bodies in there, I'm getting customers in there on a Monday night. So to answer your question, I think I don't staff 10 just for the sake of staffing 10. We staff so what works best for the restaurant and the service and the customers. It's always a balance. That's why I didn't want to answer it just like that. Right now, my restaurant requires a certain number of people on certain nights to give the best service, and it usually ends up working out the best for all parties involved. And if the place got slower because I raised pricing significantly, which is what this bill would force me to do, even if it's over 4 years, because everything else is going to keep going up too, I think I'll have less sales at the demographic I'm at. And we're a family business. We're a success story. We realize the American dream.
So you think you'll have to cut staff?
Oh, 100%. I mean, not 100% of them, but significant cuts in staff. And I think what you see is, in the restaurant industry, the big operators are kind of moving away from a full-service concept because of a lot of this pressure. So you're getting all these cool concepts. They're great, Chipotle's, but it's a quick service concept. How many employees work there? How many have the chance to make $25 an hour working there? They don't have that chance. Then they're back in the minimum wage, hourly wage pay. I mean, the full-service restaurant industry, to me, it's, with the front-of-the-house staff, it's an awesome model. Go to Europe and eat in Europe at a restaurant that doesn't have this, and where they don't tip. And, I mean, I don't want to make fun of my homeland, but, I mean, the service in Greece and the economy in Greece are not something I want to emulate this state or this country after. That's that.
Thank you.
Thank you. Representative McKiernan first, then Representative Casey, and then Representative Chippendale. So you've sparked a lot of interest from the committee.
Very quick question, though, and I just walk us through. You've said it, that basically you have to pay minimum wage come pay period if somebody hasn't made minimum wage. How does that work?
Well, real simple. You call in your payroll. Here's this person at this hourly rate, and you write down what their tips are, which are usually generated by the POS system, and the servers each night when they cash out tell you how much their cash tips are. The credit card tips are captured. So, I call it into our bookkeeper, and she'll email us back and say, on the rare occasion it happens, sometimes it happens with the bussers, hey, so-and-so is short $4 to make minimum wage or short $13, and they notify us that they'll be upping their check they'll be coming out of our money to make minimum wage. And what's great about that is sometimes it's like so-and-so reported 0 tips. So you go back and, Mom, I don't want to point fingers, but, sometimes we make clerical errors sending that report out, or the person didn't punch in their tips. So you call them up and go, what happened? How'd you do on tips? Did you make any tips this week? They're like, yeah, I made tips. What are you talking about? Like, well, it says 0 for yesterday. Like, oh, sorry about that. And you just work it out. I mean, I'm always asking my servers and bartenders, how did you do today? How did you do today? Because I don't want the turnover. I don't want the turnover. And when you lose a great server to another restaurant, and it's happened to us. I've lost plenty of servers to Federal Hill, Mike, and they've come back. They've come back for a host of reasons. Not because they were necessarily they went there and weren't making as much. They might have been making more money, but it's just the marketplace. It was a different pace, a different style of service.
But to the point that I was making, you call it in, and when the payroll checks come out, it's made up for. And
Absolutely.
And I think you said earlier it's a weekly pay for you?
Absolutely.
That answers my question. Thank you.
Representative Casey, and then Representative Chippendale.
Thank you. Bill.
Sir.
I'm sorry. Thank you, Bill. Thank you for your testimony.
Thank you.
My question is, you are a border community to Massachusetts. I know recently they raised their tip minimum wage as well. Do you have any connections or associates from the Massachusetts industry, and do you know how that's affected their restaurant business as well?
Well, I know
From the business side.
Well, I know what it did. Let's talk about that increase, because it increased their hourly wages for their tipped employees by 37 cents.
Okay.
Okay, so Massachusetts went from $2.63 to $3 this year. We were at $2.89. We were ahead of them. Right now we have about 11 cents below Massachusetts at this time. Mm-hmm. I'll tell you one thing. They're in a much more stronger economy in the state of Rhode Island to bear that. Furthermore, what I would also point out, when you look into the effect of how you raise your prices in Massachusetts versus Rhode Island, take our sales tax, take their sales tax. Theirs is lower. Some communities it's 6.25%. Some communities it's a little bit more if they have a municipality tax. They're lower. That affects our competitive set on a border community, if you talk to people in Cumberland and Woonsocket, vis-a-vis Massachusetts. So it's not an apples-to-apples comparison. And the short answer is it just costs businesses a little bit more money to do business in Massachusetts, but they're in a better competitive set than we are to handle and absorb that.
Okay. Thank you.
Representative Chippendale, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you very much for your testimony tonight.
Thank you.
I'd like to go back to a couple of things that you mentioned. You mentioned that as an establishment, you work very hard to make sure that your other employees, and my wife has 25 years in restaurant management experience, so I kind of, through osmosis, have learned quite a bit about the business, and it's hard work. You try to keep your other employees, whether they're bussers, as you said, or well, bad example, the cooks, floor managers, greeters, whatever. You try to keep them on par. Now, some jobs are would earn more. A chef is going to earn more than a line cook as they work their way up. But those prices are adjusted based on what your servers make, correct? Because you want them to stay competitive, if I understood what you said.
Somewhat. I mean, that's a function of a couple of things. It's a function of, the front of the house shouldn't walk away with all the spoils versus the back of the house. And you always have that tension. I'll pay them. They get paid a much higher hourly wage inherently. And in my situation, it's a lot higher than the minimum wage for many of my employees. I do have some minimum wage employees, and they tend to be new employees, counter staff, hostesses, hosts that are of high school age in most instances. I pay, I think, a competitive rate to get my cooks to come work for me. Some make $15 an hour, some make 16, some make 11. It's spread out. It's based on experience, and it's really that simple.
So,
And it's based on the overall marketplace.
so with this proposal, you're essentially increasing the, let's just say servers for now to keep it simple for the sake of discussion. You're increasing servers' minimum wage by over 3 times, over 300%, bringing them up to $9 that would be. So add their tips to that, because as we've heard in testimony before, there evidently is no impact on the tipping, which I'm a little leery about, but I'll take that at face value. So your servers will be making precipitously more, and therefore you will now have to compensate your entire staff even more, and that will add to your total payroll, because it's not just going to affect tipped employees. You're going to have to compensate your other employees.
100%.
Absolutely.
And I get, and you know what? Like, I really want to compensate them more.
Sure.
I do. But the numbers are the numbers.
Absolutely.
And the numbers don't lie. Like, they can't be an inconvenient truth for me.
Right.
Because I got to pay my mortgage every month. I got to submit my sales tax. My family's got to submit our sales tax every month. And we got to pay our property taxes, our insurances, and everything else we need to run that business. And as much as, like, if we've had to cut back because we've slowed down or the economy's off, like, as much as it hurts, and we have some heated arguments about having to let people go as a family, you have to do it. Because I'm not going to get a Wall Street bailout as a small business owner in the state of Rhode Island to pay my mortgage, because it's just the numbers are the numbers. I mean, certain jobs just pay a certain amount of money. And
Agreed. And just one final comment is I've had the great privilege and experience through my employment of traveling to almost every state in the country, eating there as well, and I can state without any hesitation that the closest place to Rhode Island would be New Orleans in particular. But Rhode Island is very unique, so I don't know if any of the national studies would be an apples to apples or even an apples to navel oranges. I mean, we are a unique animal in our restaurant industry, and as you pointed out, it is a huge part of our economy. So with that, I thank you for your testimony and look forward to hearing the rest.
thank you.
Are there any more questions for witnesses? I have just one, and a thank you for the lengthy testimony and then answering our questions. But what happens to the worker when they're not, the tip worker, the server, when they're not serving a table, when they're doing a setup, early setup, or a cleanup? How do they get compensated? Or is that part of the tip process? Do they get, the point I'm asking is, do they get the standard minimum wage, or do they get the sub-minimum wage?
Well, the way the law works is that as long as it's incidental to what they're doing. And there is some downtime when they're not serving a table and they're setting up their tables or sweeping the floor on their tables, or, doing roll-ups, or, polishing glasses that they're going to serve to their customers that are all incidental to doing the service. It tends to be, in my restaurant, a very small percentage of what they do most of the time. So I guess, so they get paid the tip wage. That's the answer to the question. And that's that.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Bill. And one last question
Sure, absolutely.
from Representative Palangi, then we have to move on. I have 156 witnesses.
I'll be very quick. So if an employee works 20 hours, 40 hours, what have you, you have to pay them the equivalent of $9 an hour, regardless of whether they got tips or not. I mean, it's be pretty much impossible for an employee to work 40 hours or 20 hours or what have you and get absolutely no tips whatsoever. It's conceivable, but not.
Well, Let me give you an instance where
I guess the point I'm trying to make is it just the honor system? So someone could just, what was that, $39.95 for your bottle of wine and salad and that deal?
Yeah.
So it's possible for a waiter or waitress to say, a server, I should say, excuse me, to say they didn't give me a tip. And then at the end of the week, say, I only made $3.50 per hour for the hours I worked, and you have to pick up the difference. So it's kind of like an honor system?
Well, yes and no, because like I said before, numbers don't lie. Because what happens is they have credit card sales, and most tips are left on the credit card. So you get a report that says credit card sales, credit card tips, cash sales, cash tips. And miraculously, you didn't receive any tips for the cash. I mean, it doesn't. I've never seen that happen.
Well, suppose they cut it in half, or is it just an honor system in the industry that a server would say, I got 20% tip from that customer, 10% from that? Is that how it works?
Yeah. I mean, pretty much. And the IRS actually creates programs where so you don't have some of that ambiguity. Where
they are wonderful, the IRS, aren't they?
Well, they are, but they basically best. They'll basically do a tax treaty, if that's the correct word. And one of my lobbyists, someone can correct me if they want, one of the experts, where they look at your average tips by employee, by position, with the tip wage, and they'll say, look, so you don't have to get into this back and forth with all the employees. We'll say that it's a certain amount of tips per hour. You'll pay the taxes on that no matter what happens. And if they don't make enough money, you still got to pay the difference to them. But it's just it's actually a protection for me, because what happens when the employees do not report their tips and I get audited by the IRS and it's off, I'm on the hook. We're on the hook for that. So I see your point, but at the end of the day, it is an honor system, and luckily I got,
How often do you have to kick in to achieve that, on average?
The only time it happens for me really is with bussers, or if someone didn't report tips on a certain shift. They punched out wrong, they didn't say it, and that's really the only time it ever happens to me. It usually happens with bussers. A lot of times that tells you something. Then I ask the servers, the busser's doing a good job, what's going on? Oh yeah, they're doing good, and you're just trying to figure out what happens. It just.
So last year, would you say it cost you $1,000, $2,000? You have, what did you say, 75 employees or 60 employees?
Yeah, but I'm telling you, it's happened to 75, only 30 tipped employees, 35 tipped employees. I think if it happens once or twice a month, I think that's about the high in my particular example. And it usually tends to be a busser or a newer server that had very limited shifts and started off with a small section, 2 or 3 tables. And in that instance, we pay the difference right away.
Thank you.
But they're so eager to get off the training rate into the tip wage. I mean, they want to get out of training and get tables. It's a conflict, because you're like, I don't want to get you off training just yet because I want to make sure you're ready to give good service to my customers. And then they're like, well, I'm ready. Let me take my 5 tables and let's do this. And I like the eagerness, but we want to make sure everyone's ready, because they make good money doing this.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Kitsillis. Representative Tanzi,
Bill.
welcome to House Labor.
Thank you. It is not often that I am before you. Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee.
I had the pleasure of being before you last night.
Yes, indeed. My name is Teresa Tanzi, and I am here tonight to discuss my experience as someone who has worked in the restaurant industry for 14 years.
And I appreciate that, and we do want to hear that, but let me tell you what I've asked. We have 156 people, approximately, who've signed up to testify, so I'd ask you to be as brief as possible.
Absolutely.
Thank
I have
you.
4 points that I would like to make.
Thank you.
In those 14 years, I have worked at dozens of restaurants, somewhere between around 45 restaurants, I would say. And in all of those restaurants, one has paid me according to the law. So I can hardly blame them for not doing so. It would be an administrative nightmare to have to track every single server, how much each one makes, how long they worked, the number of hours. It's an administrative nightmare. So the problem is that in spite of the fact that they're required to do so, I, who am no shrinking violet, could never confront them because of fear of retaliation. So here I'm working for someone. I'm well aware of the fact that they're breaking the law, but there's nothing that I can do because I'm relying on my manager and the owner of that restaurant for my employment. So the vast majority of restaurants are not doing this. In fact, the Department of Labor surveyed 9,000 restaurants over 2 years, and they found 84% of them violate the law. So we have 16% that are actually paying their employees in accordance with the law. So perhaps you'll hear from that elite group tonight. Perhaps the restaurant owners that will all come before you will be a part of that elite 16, that sweet 16. But I'm here tonight to talk about those who are not elite. You'll hear from servers how they'll be making $100,000 a year, 6, 7 figures, or 5 or 6 figures. Again, those are the elite. And I'm here to represent the average person who does not make that kind of money. So working breakfasts and lunches with incredible income instability. And that type of instability, not knowing how much you're going to make each day, whether you're going to get cut before you even get a table because things are that slow, it leads to economic insecurity. And in my 14 years, I have experienced that firsthand. I've had incredible difficulty getting loans, and I've even had to pawn items in order to make ends meet. So despite the fact that I was always fully employed, often with 2 or 3 jobs, I have faced great insecurity as a server. So 7 states do this. They do a better job at paying their employees because they have one fair wage. And we're not talking about elites there. We're talking about places like Montana and Minnesota.
I just want a point of clarification from me. When
Yes.
you're quoting those statistics that's national statistics, correct?
Yes, indeed.
Thank
Yep. So those 7 states pay a higher wage to their employees, one fair wage, and they're not all, sunny California. There are places like Montana and Minnesota, so hardly places that are, thriving meccas. We're talking about Alaska, Hawaii, Nevada, Oregon, California, and Washington State. And in those 7 states, there is significant data to show that restaurants have done better, that they have a higher per capita sales after increasing to one fair wage for all employees. Their employment growth has increased, and that includes the area of servers. So you may hear people tell you anecdotally what they think may happen. I'm here to tell you what has happened in the 7 states that have made this change. They hire more servers. They have higher sales, and the number of restaurants actually grows in those states, and we have data to support that. Now, back to retaliation, because I think that that's the one thing that I can personally testify most to. As a server, you really are at the end of the power dynamic. You're at the very bottom of the pile. You rely on the manager who provides shifts. So they decide whether you get the popular evening shifts on weekends or whether you're doing breakfast on a Tuesday morning. You have the hostess who seats you. If they happen to not like you for whatever reason, they can seat you all at once. They can just choose not to seat you at all. They can put the really big popular tables in someone else's section. We have servers who are at the whim of the bartender. We have to be nice to them, otherwise there's retaliation for where they are not giving us our drinks on time. The same thing happens with the kitchen. So we have to rely upon them for giving the food to us to make our tables happy. All of those things determine how much we make in tips. And the best part is we have to rely upon the mood of our...
But wouldn't that be true, respectfully, regardless of what the wage was?
I will say no, because if I had one fair wage, then I would have been able to put that application into the bank and would have been able to show my income quite clearly and plainly and reliably, and I would have been eligible for those loans. I would have been able to say, I'm getting 5 shifts this week. I can estimate that I'm going to earn enough money to pay my rent at the end of this month, and that's not the case, and I'm here to tell you that firsthand, Mr. Chairman.
I was a bartender. I'm, well aware. I was a bartender for several years, so I know. But the point I'm making is I don't see the nexus between a $3 wage and a $4 wage in your scenario of being liked. If you're liked at $4 a wage or at $3 a wage, you're going to get the good shifts, the good tables. And if you're not liked under your scenario, you're not going to get it.
Not necessarily about likability. My point is about retaliation. And the point being that women who are the predominant members of this server class are subject to different types of harassment and to different types than men are.
But is that...
And with all due respect, Mr. Chairman, I would like to continue just a little bit with my story, because it does happen and it's a daily occurrence. And if someone touches you, or if you're waiting on a table and it's a party of 10 and that's all the money you're going to make tonight, and they want to be fresh with you in some way, shape, or form, I refer to it as a golf clap in my vernacular. So it's a very polite little, whenever somebody says something that's funny, you're waiting on someone and they say something that's not necessarily funny, but you have to laugh. If someone touches you inappropriately, what are you going to say? There's very little recourse as a server that you have. And as a woman, I would posit that it's much more difficult to even manage that. I have endured, I won't even say broadly, I have endured situations that are unacceptable over and over again through my 14 years. And it is simply because I do not know that at the end of working a 10-hour shift, instead of walking home with a paycheck, I have to wait and see what my customers pay me. And again, it's the bottom rung of power. I am reliant upon, if my manager wants to sexually harass me, I'm at their whim as well. It becomes incredibly difficult for any person to stand up to their manager, and when we are relying that much on them for our schedules and on customers that much for our tips, it makes it incredibly difficult for us. And there are significant statistics that have, I don't know who else is testifying behind me, but
156 other people.
I'm sure there will be plenty of stories to amplify that and statistics to quantify it. But I can tell you from my personal experience that sexual harassment is prevalent, and it's in a way because I, as a server, had the least power in the dynamic. And that's where those situations are most likely to happen, when the power dynamic is that unstable.
Any questions for Representative Tanzi? Representative Casey first. I'm sorry, Representative Giarrusso.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Representative Tanzi. First of all, you mentioned golf clap.
Yes.
So my point is, any woman or anybody getting sexually harassed, they should hit somebody with a 9-iron, regardless of where it is, if it's at work or whatever.
I appreciate that, and we can have a conversation about the harassment that still happens in life today.
That's just terrible.
It's persistent no matter what position. As a woman, we are subject to it, and I look forward to having that discussion with you offline, and maybe you can follow me around with a golf club for a week, and we'll see how often it gets
I'll bring my whole bag if I have to.
I would appreciate that. I look forward to it. In fact, it'll be a nice, easy week for me for a change.
Thank you. So my question is, you mentioned states that have a different wage. You have a lot of data. I notice you have a lot of notes. Can you just tell me what those wages are? Just a hypothetical or an average?
At the states?
Yes.
They have raised it to what the minimum wage is in those states. And I don't know exactly what those, they vary, but I mean, I know that they're above the federal minimum wage, even in I would say at least 5 of those 7 states. So they are getting paid at the very least what the federal minimum wage is, but obviously what the state minimum wage is.
And how many hours is a typical waiter or a server? How many hours a week do they work?
It varies greatly, and I'm sure that some of the restaurant owners can, give you more detail. But there are high seasons and low seasons, and just like the restaurant owners themselves, servers suffer through the lean seasons, and then they work 1,000 more hours, during the heavy seasons. So it is completely unpredictable, and I understand the plight of the restaurant owners. I really do, because their gains are the servers' gains. And I would not be here advocating for something like this that's this controversial, where 150 people show up, and I would not be putting my face
156.
on it. Did I not firmly believe and did not have the data to back up the fact that one fair wage helps businesses, it helps employees, it helps the local economy, because those people now have more money in their pockets. And just like Representative Palangio said, they spend it. They like to go out to eat just as much as everyone else, and they're returning those dollars back into the industry. And, their employment growth in those 7 states has grown, including servers. We'll hear anecdotally tonight what people hypothesize may happen. They say, I will have to lay off my servers. I will have to go from 4 a night down to 3 a night. And the truth is that in the 7 states, the employment numbers have grown, including in the server range. So I just want to point that out. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any further questions for Representative Tanzi? Thank you very much for your testimony, Representative.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
I'm going to stop this hearing for 1 minute and go back to the E-Verify and give Michael Payanta a chance to speak. But, Michael, 1 minute, please.
Absolutely. I thank you, Chairman. I apologize for not being here. In a nutshell, failure to have E-Verify presents a situation where undocumented workers who really should be called extorted and blackmailed and abused workers, it puts them in a situation where they're used as little different as slave labor by unscrupulous business people. We're all familiar with the tragic situation that happened in New Bedford several years ago, where there was that manufacturing operation. A lot of those families were totally broken up, turned upside down. Those 2 characters, they were fined heavily, but it presented a very small percentage of their total contract. And for us to not have E-Verify represents a violation of the fundamental principle of equality under the law, and it allows, like I previously stated, what amounts to slave labor. And the bill that we're talking about now, I know that there's got to be, the statistics would hold it out, the law of averages, that there are a number of people in this state who are working in the restaurant industry who could potentially be impacted by this bill that's currently being discussed, who are here illegally, who are undocumented. They wouldn't be affected at all if this bill were to pass. So for the previous bill that I'm talking about, I would urge the committee to go ahead and send this to the floor of the House for a vote and help end what amounts to slave labor in our state. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions? Thank you very much.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Let's go back to 5364, Representative Regenberg's bill. I'm going to call people in threes, and then I'm going to announce the next 3. So if you are listening, you can come here. First will be Maddie Conway, Dan Berkey, and Kate Comrie. Please come up and forward. After that, we're going to hear from Danielle Donnelly, I believe, Mike Ajulo, and Jordan Budd. Those will be the next 3. Welcome to House Labor.
Thanks very much. Thanks for the opportunity to share my testimony with you today. I will try to keep it brief. So my name is Maddie Conway. I am a former restaurant worker, and I am now an organizer with the Restaurant Opportunity Centers United. I left the nonprofit sector to become a restaurant worker because of my passion for creating community through food and hospitality. And I loved what I did. I learned that working in the restaurant industry requires a lot of skills, including but not limited to physical strength, interpersonal skills, time management, prioritization. I know there's a lot of folks in the room who've been in the industry, so I know that that's understood by all. share this with you to illustrate that restaurant workers are professionals. Tipped workers are professionals. People like the workers I meet every day work in the industry because they love it and because they take pride in what they do. I think there's a misconception we sometimes encounter that restaurant workers are in it for a quick buck, or it's an extra job, or it's teenagers who want some extra spending money, or it's only college students who always leave in the summer. The truth is 60% of restaurant workers in Rhode Island are over the age of 24. And 32% of all of Rhode Island's restaurant workers are parents. So we talked a little bit earlier about who is the breadwinner of the family, who's working in the restaurant industry. 32% of workers are parents. And I think that's really important to acknowledge. However, the sub-minimum wage system has made it impossible for these folks who love what they do to actually make a career out of the job that they love, much less buy a house or provide for a family on $2.89 an hour. As other folks said before, living off tips means unstable, variable income. It means exposure to wage theft for workers, and for employers, it means exposure to wage and hour violations. I believe the representative before me referenced the Wage and Hour Department of Labor investigation of 9,000 restaurants that found, to reiterate, that 84% of those restaurants violated the requirement to sort of top off, if you will, tipped workers' earnings to equal out to the minimum wage when divided by their hours. So to continue living off tips not only creates this situation, which is a liability, I think, on both sides, but it also creates an inability for workers to stand up to customers, coworkers, or their own managers in the face of sexual harassment from those groups, for fear of losing a tip or even a busy shift that could make or break keeping their heads above water. Living off tips also means not being able to plan for your own financial future. This week I spoke with Maria, who is a server at the Johnny Rockets in the mall across the street. And she is a mother of 4. Her oldest child is 12 years old.
That's actually 2 minutes, but I'll let you finish your thought. And then just so you know, and everyone else knows, I want to encourage you to submit written testimony.
Certainly.
So I don't want to cut anyone's point of view off, but I do have to limit the amount of time because, especially the first speakers, they went a lot longer than I anticipated. It's after 6:30, we're only into the third or fourth speaker. We have 156 people, so I want to be fair to everybody because I don't want people to leave and not have a chance to speak. So I'll let you finish your point, and please submit. Even if you don't have it tonight, we'll take emails. Please submit any kind of written testimony you want.
Thanks very much. I'll be sure to do that. To finish my point, I share all of this with you to say that it really is time for the restaurant industry to take responsibility for paying their own workers. Folks who are earning that $15 or $20 an hour working a great service job are earning that from the community members who live in their own communities and are paying their own wages, not from their employers. And it's time to change this system for the benefit of everybody. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Maddie. Dan? Thank you.
Thank you. My name is Daniel Burke. I'm a server and a bartender. I started working in a restaurant 6 years ago. I started as a host, and I worked my way up, busser, runner, bar back, server, bartender. And for me, this is about protection of my wages. And respect, and kind of, I feel like the current wage kind of devalues me as an employee. And I guess I try to give you the most severe example of that is this past summer I worked at an outdoor bar. I was really excited, really great place, fun place to go get drinks. But I was forced to come into work, or I came into work because I want to do my job. When it was cold, when it was raining, at the beginning of the season and the end of the season, all the way into late October. And there were many days where I was not getting any tips. I'd work a 10-hour double, and not get any tips or less than $20 or $30. And now, if I trust my employer to pay up to the minimum wage, right, I still think that's an unfair situation. And I know there's times that they didn't. But there's not very much transparency.
They did or did not?
I know that there are times that they did not. But there's not a lot of transparency. I'm not looking at their records, their books. I can't, it takes a lot of work on my end to track it and call them on it. And that's a difficult situation in and of itself. But when you think about it, there's a day that I work 10 hours that I get 0 tips. but it's averaged out over a week. So the next night I'm slammed and I'm working my butt off and I'm earning this money, these tips from these guests. But that gets averaged with the day that I'm not, making those tips. And so I earn that $100, that $200 that I make on that hard night, and it's not fair that I have to, average it over these other days.
Let me ask you a question. By raising the rate $1 or $2 or $3 or $5 or whatever it is, how does that change the whole system?
What it changes is that portion of my wage is protected. That, however much you raise it, is a good thing, because that's how much more I can count on that I'm going to get. And it's just difficult. There's a lot of labor on those days when I'm not getting tipped too. Setting up an outdoor bar, I'm carrying kegs, a couple 100 feet with a dolly. I'm metal slats to open it up. I'm putting TVs up. I'm doing a lot of work, and I have felt like I'm not being compensated for it.
Thank you. Any questions for Mr. Berge? Thank you. Representative G. Russo.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It sounds to me like if you're doing something other than your normal job, I think you should take that up with your employer. But that's just me. I would, that's for sure. But actually, Maddie, you referenced 32% of wait staff would be the primary breadwinner in their family, if I got you right?
32% are parents, so I would assume that, they may be the primary breadwinner, though they may have partners.
Now, is that a Rhode Island statistic, or is that a national?
That's in Rhode Island.
So do you all work in Rhode Island? You live in Rhode Island?
I'm an organizer based out of Massachusetts, but I'm devoting my time to Rhode Island at this time.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other further questions? Let's go to Kate.
Yes, hello. I'm a 31-year-old mother. I am. I started bartending at the tender age of 20 in Providence, Rhode Island. I was a bartender for many years. I've worn a lot of hats. I've had a lot of jobs. I love working in this city, which is increasingly expensive for really hardworking hospitality people to be in, to live in, to eat in, to exist in. A lot of people have spoken to the unpaid work, that it is like a negligible amount of time you spend. As you can see, I'm a kind of a slight woman. I've spent more hours than I care to think about heaving dozens upon dozens of cases of beer in cramped corners. I have cashed out waitresses. I've cleaned tables, mopped floors, carried mats covered in God knows what, weighing probably 100, 200 pounds by the end of the night between, all over the floor for $2.89 an hour. When you wear a particular hat of like a service bartender, you have these waitresses, and you're making them drinks. It's sort of this interconnected web where, say they only make $50 and they're supposed to give you 10, 15% as a tip out. You had better hope that they give you that. But when that is their only $50 for that shift, there's a continual feeling of pressure to crush each other, that everybody wants to cling to that wage just to make ends meet. I have worked in lots of places, and some are representative of some of the testimony we've heard, really ethical people that care about their workers. But there are just as many that do not. And it is in those instances where people are highly retaliatory, where if you speak your mind, if you are questioning of the status quo, you are punished for that sort of behavior. I think there are many, many great businesses here, but I think it would remove that pressure, that feeling to have a sense of security. Raising a child on $2.89 an hour, 2-3 jobs. I think that this would be a boon to the economy, to parents like myself, to people that love the city, want to live here, want to work here, and like their jobs.
Thank you. Any questions? Representative G. Russo.
It wouldn't be right if I didn't ask a question.
I'm sure.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Looking forward to it.
It sounds to me like we might be speaking about different things. Like something in fairness about you doing a job that you weren't, that's not part of your job description, that might be a time for another bill. I mean, I feel your pain. I mean, if I'm getting paid to be a waiter, I don't want to be scraping the floors for 3 hours at the end of the shift or carrying a 200-pound drenched mat.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely true. I think there's a lot of issues that are very deeply interconnected,
Right.
that some people have spoken to, it being a women's issue, a family issue, a labor issue, an ethical issue. But if you can get somebody to do that heavy lifting for $2.89 an hour, why wouldn't you?
Yeah, I wouldn't expect anybody to do it even if it was
Yeah, I think
$8.
that's true. And I think that, I've never had a payroll person call me to say, hey, we owe you money this week. I mean, never, not once. Never, not once. And also there's an issue of shame. I mean, if you feel like you're not doing your job properly, if you have to contact somebody to say, hey, I didn't make enough tips, well, go make yourself some tips. And yeah, people do that, and you do get second jobs, and you hustle, and you work, and maybe you deal with some whatever happens, but I think that it would afford me a level of safety, that being able to show somebody who I want to maybe lease an apartment from, my 4 paychecks that show I work this many hours, that lets me participate in the economy. It lets me stay in the city that I love. It gives me a sense of security. There's no reason that I should work a job, work so many hours, and still, qualify for food assistance in the state of Rhode Island, which, as you've heard, is the reality for a lot of really hardworking people.
So I assume you live in Rhode Island and you're working in Rhode Island right now?
I am not working in the service industry at this time. I went back to school. It simply wasn't financially viable. I stopped working in 2013. But doesn't that say quite a bit that I would rather go into student loan debt, that is more financially viable for me than to pay somebody $10 an hour for care, when I cannot even guarantee myself minimum wage working in an industry where therein lies all of my experience.
Right. See, what my point was speaking of two different things about the different working conditions, which really doesn't pertain to this bill. I don't think an extra.
I think that I agree. I think that it's hard, especially for somebody that has lived the experience, to divorce the $2.89 an hour from what it is like to live that. From what is okay. So you don't want to talk about childcare. That's not the task at hand, or wage theft, or that's not the task at hand, or harassment is not the task at hand. And maybe these things aren't causative, maybe you can't ever really find what exactly it is that makes it hard for us, but there's a whole lot of correlation. I mean, far too much to ignore, I think.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions? Thank you.
I just wanted to make one thing. You asked Maddie, and you also asked her. I currently live in Boston, but I currently work for a wage under $3. And I just wanted to make that clear to the committee.
Here in Rhode Island or in Boston?
In Boston.
And we are here
Who's looking out for you in Boston?
Me. No, we are here to support this initiative in Rhode Island because we are also running an initiative similar to this in the Massachusetts State House. So we're here.
We're the test case for you.
We're going to be here until breakfast time because all these people are from Boston?
Thank you.
Well, there is the food industry.
Thank you.
Hopefully somebody
Appreciate
brought
it.
breakfast.
Thank you.
Don't worry, we'll tip the waiter very well.
Mike, Jordan, Bud, Meg, Forsky, if I'm saying it right. Then the next 3 after that would be Kenneth, Kennard, Ray, Joe, Fortune, and Mike Garullo again, I think, or different Mike Garullo. Arujo, there's 2 of you.
No, I don't think.
Sorry? Oh, I'm sorry, Danielle. Danielle, you'll be next. But I will ask, though, after you testify, because there's a lot of people waiting to get in, after you've testified, you can go in the other room and watch the rest of the hearing. But I just want the people who are next up to come in the room. So just after you've testified, if you don't mind watching the rest of the hearing outside in the other room, it'll give the people who are going to testify an opportunity to be prepared. So, Danielle, I apologize. You'll be the next one. Please go right ahead. Michael.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My name is Mike Arujo. My family has been in Rhode Island since the turn of the century. My father's a Cape Verdean prize fighter from Fox Point. My grandfather was a clerk of the Supreme Court. I belong to Rhode Island in every way. I've worked in the service industry for years, not in the past couple of years. Now I'm working for Rock United to try to raise the sub-minimum wage. I think there's been a lot of statistics and facts drawn about it, but the reality of this wage is that it allows for, as Representative Tanzi pointed out, an unequal power relationship between an employer and employee. It's not a solid negotiating position to be paid $2.89 an hour and then have to ask your employer to make it up when your performance is measured by your behavior to your customers. It creates an unfair circumstance where, one, that the employee has to admit to the employer that they are incapable of fulfilling the basic requirements of the job. And then to you, Representative Giarrusso, those extra tasks are built into the job. It averages out to about 3 to 4 hours a day that they spend working at $2.89 on side work, on prep, and in cleaning, which is unpaid, effectively unpaid labor. That means that not only is there a debt owed, but an industry that's profitable and good is doing so on the backs of what is turning out to be a majority of women who work in this industry. This is 10% of the population, of the working population of Rhode Island. This is a majority of the women. A majority of them are women. A significant portion are mothers, and a significant portion of that are single mothers. This issue speaks to how we believe society should be shaped. Do we believe that our citizens deserve equal treatment and deserve full equality? Or do we believe that there's a second tier that women, increasingly, belong to? And if that's the case, then we should admit that. And if you want to have a sub-minimum wage, you should state that this wage is the women's wage. But I don't think we're really prepared to do that because I don't think that's what we really want. I think we want an equal society, and I think we desire for that. And that's what I'm going to finish on. Thank you.
Thank you. Jordan Bud?
Hi, good evening. Thank you for the opportunity to speak this evening. I'm a former restaurant employee. I actually am the son of a family-owned pizzeria, so you'll hear the other perspective of this issue. My family actually paid everyone above the minimum wage, not in Rhode Island, in South Carolina, where it's actually less than what you're currently paying folks. The story that I wanted to bring forth was actually about a friend of mine, Melissa, who worked alongside of me. I'm not going to have the time to get into all the details. I certainly will submit the written testimony.
Thank you.
So that you can read the whole thing. But essentially, moving into a restaurant that paid above minimum wage for her had such a tangible benefit in that she could not afford to keep her child at home. He was living with his grandparents because they did not have the income together working in other restaurants to be able to provide. As Maddie mentioned, 32% of Rhode Island's tipped workers are parents, and 69% are women. This is not an issue that is just relegated to high school students, which I happened to be at the time when I was working there. This is an issue that 60% of folks above the age of 25 who are currently tipped workers in Rhode Island deal with as a regular reality. Also, I just want to add, I was texting my parents earlier because I was asking them, hey, if the wages doubled and you're not paying people $5 an hour anymore, you're paying them $9.50, $10, how much are prices going to go up? And they said that our $4.50 pizza slice would probably go up to $6. I would gladly pay $6 to make sure that families can stay together and put food on the table. If that meant that I went out one day less a month or one day less a week, I'm perfectly happy to pay that price. And we have a lot of statistics to back up the fact that wage increases because of minimum wage increases in general, our price increases for food are not incredibly substantive. In fact, I believe the average is about 15 cents per person at like a dining party. So I don't think that is an issue that you bring up when it comes to paying someone a fair living wage.
Thank you very much, Jordan. Meg?
Hi, thank you so much. I am Meg Foskey. I'm the Policy Director for the Restaurant Opportunities Center. And what I just want to highlight is when we talk about this issue, we can't ignore the fact that it's a woman's issue. 69% of tipped workers in Rhode Island are women. So when we talk about the facts, people that are living in poverty at nearly double the rate of the rest of the workforce, relying on food stamps at double the rate, we're talking about women. This is a legislated pay inequity for women, and it perpetuates the gender wage gap. Female servers earn 74% of what their male counterparts earn. And the reason is they're more likely to work in casual restaurants. If you think about your average server at Twin Oaks and what he looks like, and you compare that to what your server looks like at Denny's, you get an idea about what I'm talking about. It's not just an economic issue, however. There's evidence that forcing workers to rely on tips for the vast majority of their income, because that's what happens when you make $2.89 an hour, puts them in a power dynamic relationship where they curry favor from customers in order to make a living. And so the choices between if a customer makes an inappropriate comment or touch, the choices between standing up for yourself or making a living. And again, this is primary household earners. This is women who are mothers and need that tip to support their families. So we've looked at this, we've done studies on this, and what we found is that forcing a worker to rely on tips for any portion of their base wage significantly increases their chances of experiencing sexual harassment. And it should be known that the restaurant industry is the single largest source of sexual harassment claims in the United States. About 7% of the female workforce works in restaurants. 37% of the sexual harassment complaints that are filed come out of the restaurant industry. So it's a huge problem that's exacerbated by the fact that you're putting women in a position where they have to curry favor in order to make tips. So I just want to say that when we think about this, there's a reason why, our partners in this fight don't just include labor, but they include groups like Planned Parenthood, the National Organization of Women, female labor leaders, because this is a women's issue in addition to being an economic justice issue. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Question from Representative Chippendale, please.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you all very much for your testimony. The woman angle being introduced at this panel is the first time we've heard of it. So I just want to ask, is it your position that if this were to go into effect, more men would become sub-tipped or whatever the term is, servers? Would that workforce become 50-50 then if this law were to pass?
Are you saying would people hire men instead of women if they had to pay them the full minimum wage?
You seem to focus on the point that it's unfair against women. So and that the industry is made up of mostly women, or that part of the industry. So are you saying if this were changed through this law, do you feel that would no longer be a woman's only issue? It would then have just as many men in the same position?
So the gender, for example, if we look at the states where there is no sub-minimum wage, the gender wage gap is reduced by about half. So yes, my position is if you raise wages for predominantly female workforce, you're going to reduce the gender wage gap and you improve the economic situation for women.
Okay.
Is that answer your question?
That answers my question. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Let's hear from Danielle. I apologize for skipping you. And then Kennard Ray and Joe Fortune. The next three after those three will be Norman LeBlanc and John Elkay and Chris Tarrow.
You want to go first, Danielle, since you've got skips?
Danielle, welcome to House Labor.
Thank you for having me here, Mr. Chairman, Vice Chairman, members of the committee. I'm currently an organizer with Restaurant Opportunity Centers, but my first job was in the restaurant industry as a waitress in a pizza restaurant. I will submit my testimony so we can keep this brief, but I would
Thank you.
like to highlight the fact that for a lot of women, their first foray into professional work is as servers, and working for a sub-minimum wage not only teaches them to expect less from their employers and teaches them to expect that their employers won't value them as employees, but also teaches them to tolerate sexual harassment from customers, from management, in whatever field they choose in the future. And if you choose to stay in the industry, like Meg Foskey said, this is the largest source of sexual harassment complaints of any industry in the U.S., and women working in this industry make up 70% of the workforce. So I just wanted to highlight the fact that this is a women's issue because women make up so much of this industry, but also I'm losing my train of thought, and I'm sorry.
That's okay. Let me ask you just a quick question. This Restaurant Opportunity Center, where are you located?
We're national. We have offices in 14 cities across the U.S. In one fair wage states like California, Nevada, but right now we're working on legislation in New England to raise the sub-minimum wage.
Okay. Thank you very much. Representative Giarrusso.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Danielle, thank you for your testimony. I'm really getting caught in the weeds here. Just as the gentleman that owns the restaurant with the Greek name couldn't figure out my name, this is all Greek to me. So I really don't understand the connection to sexual harassment. Like, what would change if it's $3 an hour more or $4? I just don't get that. I mean, if somebody's a jackass, as you use it for a better choice, for lack of a better word, I don't see what the difference is. I mean, I don't promote sexual harassment. I think those people should be tied up in jail and never come out.
Right, and as a woman, you meet a lot of those people, but in the industry, when you're made to curry favor with managers or curry favor with customers in order to get decent shifts or make up the rest of your wage, 2/3 of which is made up by the customer who may or may not want to sexually harass you, you feel like you cannot stand up for yourself. And I also wanted to point out quickly that I've been working in Rhode Island for a little while now, and I've spoken to a lot of servers across a breadth of the industry, from casual fine dining to IHOP. And there are a few servers who wanted to come out today, but were intimidated by their bosses and afraid of retaliation. So I just wanted to put that out there too.
So, I mean, if I'm reading it right, is there a certain acceptable level of sexual harassment depending on how much you're getting paid? I'm really, I can't draw the parallel between sexual harassment and $2.89 an hour.
There shouldn't be an acceptable level of sexual harassment for anybody, but when your 2/3 of your wage comes from your customer, you're not going to tell off that customer.
Well, they really should.
You should, but not if you can't make your rent that month.
Now, I'm sorry, Chairman Chikachi asked where you from. Are you actually from Rhode Island? Do you live in Rhode Island? Is that where?
Not from Rhode Island. I live in Connecticut, but I've been working in Rhode Island for the past couple weeks.
Thank you.
Yep.
Welcome. We're happy to have you here.
Thank you. I like it here.
Kennard Ray, please. Mr. Ray, welcome to House Labor.
Thank you, Chairman. So I'll be ever so brief because I know there's a lot of people who still need to testify. And I'll give you a brief piece of history, if you give me just 1 second, for my testimony. You'll be able to see it later once you read through testimony. But we are all friends of or fans of political history. I'm sure you all are. And I'll go back to 1937 when the first ever minimum wage was passed. In 1937, President Franklin D. Roosevelt, during one of his fireside chats, said this: "Do not let any calamity howling with an income of $1,000 a day executive tell you that a wage of $11 a week is going to have a disastrous effect on all American industry." What that translates to is, don't be fooled by the outrageously rich business lobby that tells you that the sky will fall if they have to pay their workers a fair wage. Now, FDR at that time was fighting for a 25-cent an hour wage, right? It took him 5 years to do it. He had to fight the Congress for 5 years straight. He had to fight the Supreme Court. It took bold moves to set the floor for the first ever minimum wage. And I say this because, each and every time that this argument comes up, you've been through this argument for the last 2 or 3 years, 3 terms, not this specific one, but on minimum wages, is that the sky is going to fall. I'm going to have to close my business. I don't know what I'm going to do. I'm going to have to fire people. It's never true. As a matter of fact, the people who end up lifting and raising their wages, they expand. They grow bigger. The proof is in the pudding. They're able to come back here and testify again. But those people never go away. It's the same business owners and business lobby that comes in again and again. So I wanted to impress that upon you because it was a bold person or a bold man at that time that was able to push the wage up then. I'm urging you to do the same thing now. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Ray. Any questions for Mr. Ray? Representative Giarrusso.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I didn't vote for FDR. I mean, but I may have, but the only thing that there was a little leak in your argument,
sure,
and it has nothing really to do with this, but with minimum wage. There is definitely data to show that every time minimum wage goes up, so does unemployment. And also, there's other things that go on as the wages get really high. There's automation. You know, I'm sure FDR never thought about a self-service gas station or self-checkout at Stop and Shop and everything else that they're trying to come up with machines to get rid of people. That's all. It really wasn't a question. It was just a comment.
Right. And Representative Giarrusso, with all due respect, what I will say is innovation is a gift and a curse of man. But that doesn't mean, and it really means, you got to do what you can to make sure that the people who are employed still, not the robots, not the machine, are paid a fair wage so that they can sustain themselves. And we know that these jobs are automated. The reason why I use the basic minimum wage as an example, because the studies never differentiate between the large studies that tell you to lift the minimum wage, never differentiate between the two tiers. It never says lift the wage for the folks at McDonald's, but don't lift it for the people at Captain Jack's. And that's something that we have to be cognizant of, because when you go into Captain Jack's or McDonald's, I mean, for you it's the same thing, but for that worker it's not. For that worker, they're dealing with the $2.89 an hour, and they're figuring out how to cobble together a decent wage as each and every hour goes by. And we know that if you're working at Captain Jack's and you're selling discount lobster, people come with discount money, and it's something that we all should be cognizant of. Thank you.
Where you from? We don't have Captain Jack's over here. Where are you from?
I'm another import. I'm from the next state over, from Connecticut.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you.
That's cool. We value everybody's opinion. Let's hear from Mr. Fortune. Thank you.
Actually, just to correct you, Mr. Arujo, his father was from here, and his parents went to school here, and you're getting the impression, but my name is Joe Fortune, and my mother worked at Hemingway's and Spats, and when me and my brother, she was a single mother, and she raised us working so hard and going to school. And there is a few misconceptions, I believe, about this, that the people on this side are not into working. I worked at Ruth's Chris for the whole time they were open, and I really enjoyed it, and I made decent money. There was some shifts that I worked that I made less than minimum wage. I can't say whether or not I ever worked a whole week without making a minimum wage. I'm not positive. It's very weather dependent. It's very dependent on the customers coming in, and you work really hard either way, and you don't come. And also another thing is that most everyone that I worked with in the server level were their primary breadwinner, and they were trying to pay mortgages, and they had babies, and it's a total myth that these people are college students or just working their way through to something else. And also I can speak to, although I'm a man, I would say my mother experienced a lot of what we were talking about, sexual harassment, when I was a kid, and it really bothered me, and she never had any recourse, because in this industry, think about it, in slave labor you don't have to pay anyone. It's been proven that there's much more instance in sexual harassment when you don't have to pay them. It puts you in a power position. So when we have only $2.89, like Mike Arujo said, we have no bargaining chip. You know what I mean? You're not valued. So you get pushed around, and you're dependent on the manager to give you the schedule, the shifts that you need. If you sit in this section or that section, you make more money or less money. So all this does is even the playing field. And personally, I would be happy if they eliminated the sub-minimum wage and shared the tips with the entire restaurant. What we're looking for here is fairness, and for the hardworking people at IHOP, and other than, I'm saying even the people at Ruth's Chris and Capitol Grill sometimes don't make enough money, and they are the breadwinners, especially at the lower level places.
Thank you very much. Any questions for Mr. Fortune? Thank you. The next three we're going to hear LeBlanc, John Elkay, and Chris Tarrow. And then the three after that would be Mark Scorantino, David Carlin, and Jack Doherty. Welcome, gentlemen.
Hello, gentlemen.
Norman, you're up first, please.
I'm a CPA, and my colleagues and I have a group that specializes in the hospitality.
Can you use your microphone, please?
Hello?
Yes.
Okay. Hi, I'm a CPA, and my colleagues and I specialize in the hospitality. And I will tell you, we have hundreds of restaurant clients, from fast serve, quick serve, to full serve, to fine dining. So I'm not here to give you a personal story. What I am here to do is to convey to you some of the industry averages and what we see across a broad spectrum. You will hear and have heard low profits. Typically, we see them 2 to 5% of sales. That's the bottom line. I will tell you that there are some that will exceed 5%. Those are only the highest performing, highest volume establishments. Generally speaking, the tip wages will average 7 to 8% of sales. Now, if I do some math and I say, okay, if we have a $2.89 wage that increases by 50%, that would go to $4.33. That would raise the average, or the percentage of the wages to sales from 7 or 8% up to 10 or 12%. The 3.5 to 4% increase is going to erase the 2 to 5% bottom line. On top of that, food costs have been rising. Beef, seafood, a lot of restaurants are afraid to raise their prices. We've seen them absorb because they don't want to raise those prices, because the economics will dictate. People will shrink away from going out to eat simply because it's optional, and if they can't afford it, they're not going to go. Their option is the grocery store. And you have seen in grocery stores, you're seeing more and more of the rotisserie chickens, or these kind of takeout things that the grocery stores are doing. Those are there, again, because that's where the sales are migrating to.
Thank you, Mr. LeBlanc. Your time is up. You can continue to submit written testimony. Are there any questions for Mr. LeBlanc? Thank you. Mr. Elkay.
I need 2 minutes and 20 seconds, though.
Only going to get 2.
Unlike people who testified before me, I actually live and work in Rhode Island. I'm a graduate of Johnson Wales University, and I own 6 Providence restaurants: Rick's Roadhouse, Harry's Bar Burger, Lux Burger Bar, 10 Prime Steak and Sushi, and Exo Cafe, which I opened in 1997. Out of my 187 staff members, 80 are tipped employees. These are the direct consequences that my company will have an effect in its employees. We have a payroll company that we submit all our payroll records to, and they automatically bring anyone up to $9 an hour. So it's a very easy system. Everyone is saying, oh, it's complicated, you have so many employees. It's a payroll company. They do it for you. You do nothing. They automatically add the money to the payroll. Poof, it disappears. So it's easily managed. I feel we're trying to solve a problem that simply does not exist. This legislation is misguided at best. And why is it possible for advocates of this bill to shout and scream from the rooftops and call us villains when we treat our staff with nothing to do with the restaurant, and they always invoke confidentiality? No one has ever mentioned the restaurant that they work at that is causing all this stuff. There are federal laws in place to deal with minimum wage, tip pools, and staff gratuities already. Rhode Island Department of Labor takes all claims very seriously and acts swiftly. I have personal relationship with them, so I know what they do. If staff is not making enough money, their restaurants, or they're being paid under the table, which people have testified to, or the owners are touching their tips, please come to my restaurants because we don't do that. My staff averages $16 an hour, and I can supply all of that to you guys with spreadsheets that I can supply to the committee. I just redact their names, that's all. So everything I'm talking about today, I can prove every word of it.
Thank you, Mr. Elkay. Any questions for Mr. Elkay? Go ahead. Representative Giarrusso has a question.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It's actually a recycled question. It sounds to me like if you're paying $16 an hour with all tips and everything, you probably have a very low turnover too, right?
That's the least they make. They make up to 25, and they don't claim all the tips, by the way. That's a sneaky little secret.
Don't say that in this building.
Yeah, well, it's the truth.
But so turnover is minimal?
Well, at the lower end, it's more because it's more college kids do it, but at the higher end, when they're making big money, it's a lot less.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Elkay. I don't want to cut off your testimony, so if you have something else you'd want us to play,
I will be glad to do that.
Submit it in writing, please.
Yes.
Mr. Taro, welcome to House Labor.
Welcome. Thanks for having me. I'll just make a couple points. First of all the people that testified before me, one person served tables in Rhode Island at Ruth Chris, and he said he made good money. The other person had 43 jobs in 11 years in the restaurant industry. Maybe the correlation to money to performance, 43, would anybody here hire somebody who had 43 jobs in 11 years? So I think
I would just ask you to concentrate on the bill and not the other.
I understand.
And I understand.
But it goes to a point.
There's a lot of passion.
Where is the problem?
Well,
who is here in the industry stating there's a problem? That is why I brought that up, only because
that's a germane point. But
I'm sorry. I should have said that, but I was getting to the point is, I don't think there is a problem. Don't take Rock's word for it, and don't take my word for it. Don't take the hospitality. Don't take Right Blue. Tomorrow, go to dinner and ask the server. Ask the server the next day. Don't ask would you like a raise. Everybody would like one. Ask them. I've worked in 11 restaurants in my life. Front of the house people have always made the most, period. My average tipped employee makes $20. That's on a $1.4 million worth of tips. My average non-tipped makes $14. This is not going to help the people making the most. This is going to help the people making the least. I have 140 employees. Do not pay one of them minimum wage. You've never seen me at a minimum wage conversation. Not one. But am I going to be able to pay that dishwasher $12 if I have to pay the person making $25, $27? Last point. I had 72,000 tipped wages last year, hours, times 610. $450,000 plus workers' comp, $500,000. I could take zero profit, and my brother could take zero, and we'd owe the restaurants plenty of money. There's no problem if they want to raise minimum wage and that's the story. But wages, gratuities, and then I'll finish, are seen as income by the federal government and by the state government. They can't have it both ways. We pay payroll taxes on it because it's seen as an income, and so do they. But yet now it isn't. It's only $2.89. No, we're all in the restaurant together. That total wage they make is because of the efforts of everybody in the restaurant. And that's how the business model got created. And I think all servers you talk to, not most of them, will say they like the model the way it is.
Thank you very much, Mr. Taro. Any questions for Mr. Taro? Vice Chairman Palangio.
I guess I have a comment and a question.
Yep.
But maybe you're correct. Maybe there isn't a problem. Maybe there is. But that's the beautiful thing that we do here. We vet things, and many times constituents bring a question or a proposal to us, and we think about it. If we think it's something worthwhile, we bring it before our body and we vet it. And that's the beautiful thing about democracy and what we do here. That's the first thing. But I think it's this whole idea of, I'm kind of learning as we're going along. It's like almost, there's so many, it seems like it's bringing up more questions than answers in reference to you have to pay them $9 an hour regardless of how much they're making, at least $9 an hour, regardless of how much they're making. And then some people are saying, some of the people that work in the industry, servers, are saying they don't want to say anything because they're frightened of losing their jobs. I don't know if that's true or not true, but people are, some of these folks are saying this. In addition to that, it almost seems there's a difference between a restaurant such as yours or Mr. Elke's, and like an IHOP or a Friendly's or, someone who's working at a place where they have, $5 or $7 dinners, if you will, or $9, a friendly type thing. And it's a different type of server in an industry such as that versus fine dining. And I venture to say that the fine dining person, as you stated yourself, is probably $20 an hour. I'll ask you a question. If you were to eliminate tips in their entirety, what do you think the job of being a server at an establishment such as yours is worth? If you just said there'll be no tipping and I'm going to pay the employee what they're actually worth, they're probably worth more than minimum wage. Even current minimum wage at $9, they're probably worth $15, because it's hard work.
Yeah, and if I could just stress two of the points you made first is when I testified the last time here, I got emails, I was on progressive blogs. There's a penalty to us coming here. So it can't be, well, they couldn't come here. It's not easy for business guys in this state to get up because, as you heard today, we're sexual harassers, we're stealing, we're thefts. That was direct testimony. It's not easy for us to come here either, so we shouldn't get penalized for coming, but yet they get a pass for not coming. Two is, the answer would be is that will be what will happen. If you ask me if the wage goes up, I cannot justify paying servers more and not paying cooks more. The divide will go. So if you look at the trends in the industry and you Google non-tipping restaurants, it's growing in all these cities. They said the industry is great. No, 5-star, great restaurants are getting rid of tips. It says it right there.
What?
Eliminating tips.
They're eliminating tips?
And the servers make less money because that's what's going to happen. I'm not going to raise my prices as a business owner to pay a person who's making $25 an hour, $9 an hour, because that's a total package. I look at it that way. I'll put a charge and I'll distribute it. Right now, the way the law is, I can't do that. I can't take tip pulling. That's the pill we heard the other day. So which way do they want it? You can't have both all the tips and the higher salary because the business model doesn't work. So what would I do? I don't know, but it'd be in the high teens and we'd lose some servers. Mm-hmm. Quality of service would go down. But I don't think my restaurant, when I get 35% of my customers on a weekend from Massachusetts to say it's better for me to come here than go to Boston, are going to feel the same way if my price goes up 20%. I think they'll say, well, I'll stay home. So I'll make my model work. The people before us were right. We're not all going to go out of business. We'll find, I actually think the ironic thing is, if this bill goes through the way they want, servers will make less money. There's no doubt. Now, it might be a more stable paycheck. They will make less money. We will
less service.
What?
And we'll have less service.
We will pay them $16 an hour, and the person at Sienna that was making 25 will now make 15, and I'll charge 17% on your bill, and I'll spread it how I like because it's no different than cost bought and put into at CVS. You don't know who gets paid what. So that will be the outcome because, the gap, we already have front of the house, back of the house issues because the back of the house resents how much the servers make. That's been true of every restaurant I've worked, and they all haven't been Sienna.
Because it is, untangling this whole thing is an educational experience for many of us here.
It's going to change the paradigm and how we do business, totally.
I think it's what restaurant owners should admit is that wage, that tip is part of their wage. It's not a nice gesture, the way the business model worked. But I will say
the whole team contributes to that tip. If your food takes a long time or your host isn't there or you wait for your table or this, you give less of a tip. That is part. So you can say, yeah, it comes from the server, but anything you pay, whether there's a tip or not, gets paid out one way or the other to the employee. It just looks different, and I get it. But at the end of the day is add that and the gratuity together. And the servers, are there servers that are wrong? Yes. I mean, restaurants. But then all these people should be down at the Department of Labor and Training. In fighting, we have laws. Again, 140 employees, I don't pay one. Not a dishwasher, not a cleaning guy, minimum wage.
That goes for me, too.
And I will tell you, the establishments that don't comply with the current law are not going to comply with new laws.
Any more questions?
Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you. Next is Mark Scorantino, David Carlin, and Jack Doherty. Okay. He was marked in the negative. So, are you Mark?
That's me.
Okay, Mark. Thank you. Is Jack Doherty here? Jack Doherty was against. We're just finishing page 1. I have 9 other pages, just so everybody knows. I just want people to know. Shandy Hanna, Maureen Martin from the AFL-CIO. Paul McDonald. Thank you, Paul. And Mark Mancino from the AFL-CIO. All right. Jamie Rhodes from Planned Parenthood. I'm sorry?
Testifying in other committees tonight.
Well,
Chairman, if it's okay, I'm Krista. I work with Jamie Rhodes, and I'm going to provide
okay.
Planned Parenthood testimony.
Fair enough. Somebody. Okay. The next 3 will be Peter. I can't read that. Nightingale. Peter Nightingale. Maren Jensen. Amy Barkley. Ray Desmaris. Carmelo Correnti. Fred Goodwin. So why don't we hear from you 3, and I'll call them again. So please go forward, Mr. Carlin. Mr. Sorrentino. Sure. Thank you.
Push the button. Oh, there it goes. First of all, thanks for hearing us today. I would like to give a nice big golf clap to Representative Tanzi and anybody else who's been trying to distract you from the issue at hand.
Let me just interrupt you because I want the testimony to be on the bill and not on the other witnesses. And
okay,
I'm saying that
fine.
to everybody. I respect everybody's point of view. I'm willing to stay here until midnight to listen to everybody.
Okay, great.
And I'll stay here late, but I don't want character assassination on any side. And I just want to. So please, that doesn't help your cause.
Okay.
And you may feel that way, and that's your prerogative. But before this committee, I would like the testimony to be germanely on the bill.
Fair enough. Thank you. Sorry. But I do think that I'm sensitive to women's issues, just for the record, and I've kicked customers out of my restaurant for mistreating female employees before.
You are commended for that, sir.
Thank you. Again, this bill is, I'm sorry, I have a script, but I'm going to submit it because I'm going to respond to some other
Just look
things.
at us and speak from the heart. That's really,
Thank you.
Carries more, and then you can submit your written testimony.
Okay, thanks. Just a couple of things that I heard. People saying that, again, Ms. Tanzi, I'm nothing against her character, but she did say that she represents the average person. Well, I'm the average person because my wife, Katie, and I began our service industry careers on Block Island. I started out as a dishwasher. Katie started out as a busser. And we worked our way up from dishwashers and bussers to become proprietors of the restaurants that we now operate on Block Island. It took a long way to get there, and we worked really hard to do it. The restaurants that we operate, we have staffs that have been returning. They're successful. We walked into these turnkey. We took them over from a previous owner. We treat our staff like they're our family, and we do take care of them. I do believe you need to look out for people who and restaurant owners who are not taking care of their people. But something else that was said was that that servers are the end of the power line, and you asked the question, Representative Pelagio, sorry.
Angio.
Thank you, sorry. You asked what is a good server worth? The answer to that is that you can't put a price tag on a good server. And there's two reasons that servers don't make minimum wage. The first is that they're not a good server, or they're not trained enough, or they don't have enough experience. The second reason is that the restaurant isn't a good restaurant, and they're going to go out of business anyways. Anyways, someone else said that, restaurateurs think the sky's going to fall if this goes through. Well, it will fall, and it's going to fall on me and my wife.
Thank you very much.
I apologize earlier for my...
That's all right. Any questions? I know this is a very passionate issue.
Sorry.
Mr. McDonald, welcome to House Labor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. It's an interesting day to be here talking about minimum wage on St. Joseph's Day, since he was the patron saint of workers, so I'm very glad to be here. And by the way, any questions on FDR? I was born when he was president, so I can help you with that too.
Some
also remember when chips were probably a nickel or a dime. We'd throw them on the coffee counter when you had whatever your dinner at some local diner and everything. And of course, over the years, it started to creep up a little bit. But I would suggest to you that 20 years without a raise, I don't think there's anybody in this room that's going to work for anybody for 20 years without a raise. The continuation of the sub-minimum wage for tip workers, that's like a gift to an industry that hasn't really ponied up. They're getting away with something that I think is unconscionable. It's time for them to consider that workers in that industry, and I heard people talking about how they have to pay their taxes, their business taxes. Well, I got a flash for them. Those workers, those wait staffs, they pay taxes. They have to register a car. Some of them might have a mortgage. They have to pay that too. So it's very, very difficult for them also. That sub-minimum wage, it smacks of legalized wage theft to me. This is time for them to give them a working wage. And it's also, in my opinion, unworthy of the state of Rhode Island to have such a low wage for people who work so very, very hard. Now, I'm fortunate in life. I've done fairly well for myself and my family, and God's been very good to me. But I'll give you an example. The other night, my wife and I said, let's go over to Uno's, because we like Uno's. It's pretty good. We had something nice. I think the bill was like $27. So we give them a 20% tip. It comes out to $6 tip. Not long ago, I went down to dinner for Capriccio's, and that bill was like $190. And of course, I have to give them now a $38 tip. But the people that work there work just as hard as the person in Uno's. The difference is it's a high-end restaurant, and not everybody works in a high-end restaurant.
Thank you, Mr. McDonald. I appreciate it. Any questions for Paul McDonald? And Mr. McDonald, if you have any other comments as well, I'd ask you to submit them in writing to the committee.
You want this?
Sure. Absolutely. Absolutely.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, thank you very much. I know this is a long night, so
Thank you.
I will conclude there.
I appreciate that. I don't know your name, the representative from Planned Parenthood.
Kristen Dart.
Thank you, Kristen.
And I'm on the list later for the NAACP as well, and I'll submit written testimony for them. It's already been provided. And
Thank
won't
you.
testify twice. So as Planned Parenthood, we have long provided reproductive health care for Rhode Island. Each year, more than 7,000 women and men get basic reproductive and preventative health care services. We provide these services no matter what a client's ability to pay for these services are. We rely on generous contributions of donors across the state to provide for those in the hardest times and who are otherwise ineligible for health coverage that they could afford. We know that many of our patients work in the service industry that is currently treating them unfairly. They have no benefits, no paid time off, and illegal yet far sub-minimum wages. This causes workers to feel as though they have little control over their economic security. Planned Parenthood is proud to provide cancer screenings, annual exams, and contraception for those who do not receive support from their employers. But what we are doing is treating a symptom of what is unfair labor practices. The current two-tiered system has inherently unjust wages and is a system of legal discrimination. No one should work full-time and yet need philanthropic assistance to meet their fundamental needs, such as reproductive health care. While Planned Parenthood offers patients a sliding fee scale for our services.
I appreciate your advocacy for your organization, but I'd like you to try to make your comments germane to the bill.
Sure.
Thank you.
Well, what we're trying to do is address the fact that there are patients who come through our doors who, if they were receiving a fair minimum wage, would have access to health insurance, possibly have the ability to take time off from work and receive a higher rate of care, be able to pay for services on their own without having to receive philanthropic, but how most of our services are provided are based on donations. And we think that it is unfair for workers to have to rely on the charity of others in order to receive health care. And we would like to see workers...
Charity meaning the gratuity?
No, charity meaning that they're not always making a fair wage, and so they're relying on our health services our sliding fee scale to receive.
They're relying on your organization to provide health care.
Exactly. And I'd also, if I just may, just address the idea of sexual harassment when you are working for tips. I paid my way through college working for tips, and I did not have Representative Giarrusso as a customer or as my boss, and regularly was told by bosses that, unfortunately, it's part of the job. If you want to make tips, then you have to be nice to customers. And it wasn't you have to endure sexual harassment, it's you have to be nice to customers. And as a 19, 20, 21 through grad school, 22-year-old kid trying to pay my way through college, what else am I supposed to say to my boss than okay? And it happens on a regular basis.
Thank you. Any questions? Representative Giarrusso.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Well, I would certainly hope my daughter would come to me before she would go to her boss in that situation. So you mentioned somebody that's making $2.89 an hour is probably someone that's getting assistance from Planned Parenthood.
Mm-hmm.
So with that said, can we assume that no one from Walmart is getting those services from Planned Parenthood that's making $10 or $9 an hour?
No, I don't think we could make that assumption, but I think you have a better ability to pay for your own health care as you make more money. It can become a priority. As you make more income, we make different choices, right? I get to, if I have $5 and then I have $10, I can do a lot more with $10 than I can with $5. So if I have to choose between food on my table and my annual exam, I may put my health at risk to put food on my table.
Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anybody here that I called earlier? I'll call one more time. Maureen Martin, Mark Mancino, Jamie Rhodes, Peter Nightingale. Okay, let's keep moving, please. We have a long night ahead of us. Maren Jensen, Amy Barkley. Am I saying it right? Is Amy Barkley here? Correct. Thank you. Ray Desmaris, come right up. Carmelo Correnti. Is Carmelo Correnti here? Fred Goodwin. Is Fred Goodwin here, please? Ed Benson. Ed Benson. Kyle Stump. Is Kyle Stump here? Avarice Malagar. Are you Avarice? I'm sorry. I have trouble reading your writing.
I do too.
Okay, well, thank you for coming here. The next will be after this will be, well, let's just hear from you three, because the next three people are not testifying. They just submitted written testimony, but let's hear from you three. Welcome.
Shall I start? I'm Amy Barkley.
Please.
Amy Barkley, I've been in Rhode Island for 30 years. In 1992, I was a waitress at Trattoria Simpatico. In 1996, I was a waitress at Trattoria Simpatico, pregnant with twins. I've been in the hospitality industry for 30 years. This isn't a gender issue. This isn't a Planned Parenthood issue. This is a performance issue. In 1996, as a wait staff, less than 40 hours a week, pregnant with twins, I was making $400 to $500 a week, and I had worked my way up from a breakfast waitress in Newport. I was great staff. I still am. Now we own it. It has nothing to do with being a woman. It has nothing to do with being a single parent. It has to do with making good choices for yourself. I made good choices for myself. I make good choices for my staff. I have never paid them less than what they were due. If I did, it's right here in the wages of Rhode Island, where it says non-payment of wages complaint form. Who's the audience? Employees. There's a great equalizer that hasn't been brought up, and that is if I have to pay my staff that level that they're suggesting, I will replace them with technology. In 1996, there was no Facebook, there was no Yelp, and there was no Samsung or Ziosk that they're offering now at Chili's, and Panera Bread's the other one. I can bring it down to bussers and runners and bartenders. I can scan your ID. I can completely protect myself, hold myself off of workman's comp. I don't have to do 7.5% for Social Security or whatever it is. This is the great equalizer. It won't be a gender issue because I won't need either gender. That's all I have to say.
Thank you very much. Any questions?
I wouldn't touch that with a 10.
I think that's the first witness you didn't have a question for, Representative Giuliano.
Actually, now that you put it that way. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Did you say trattoria?
Yes,
Trattoria
Simpatico.
I've been there, and your wait staff, I mean, you must be a good employer because everybody there is very, very nice. And it's a great place.
My return rate is incredible. The bulk of I have 15 core employees. I have upwards of 60. Come July, I have 60. And virtually out of almost all of my employees that work there just during the summers, all of them have been retained. They beg for their jobs back. And they should. I give them a shop. I give them inventory. I give them tools. I give them a beautiful spot, just like it was given to me. I give them opportunity to make their money. If they want to show up and do the work, it's there. If they don't have to. They can go to Denny's. And actually, most of them go back to Denny's to get different kinds of training, and then they come back to me. It's about retaining your staff and treating them well.
Well, I hope we don't see any iPads in your restaurants.
No.
Next witness, please.
Yeah. Do I press this?
Yep. Just identify yourself, please.
Yeah, my name. Oh, I got it. Okay, cool. My name is Avishai Malinger. I'm a cook. I've been a sous chef. I've been a chef. I've been a barista. I've bussed tables before. And I've worked in restaurants in Washington, D.C., in California, and recently I moved to Providence, and I'm now living here. I just want to touch really quickly upon 3 points. Working in California for 3 years, I see how without a sub-minimum wage, the restaurant industry is booming, and there is a lower incentive in terms of essentially you have better teamwork working between all the people, and you have restaurants thriving, and it's not an issue. You still have a lot of people going to restaurants, and it's working out very well. And then another issue I want to talk about, a lot of people are conflating the idea that tipping is inherent to the idea of dining, and that's been something that has been developed over the past, more so over the past 50 years. Even 20 years ago, I think it was pretty regular to tip more like 10, 12, 15%, and now now people are tipping a lot more. And it's becoming increasing, and the main thing is that it should be the employer's responsibility to pay their employees and not to pass that on to the customers. And it's pretty arbitrary that we've delineated this one section of our economy that says they can be tipped under minimum wage and that they are not subject to the same laws of our land. And another point that a lot of people are talking about is the Department of Labor and Training enforcing this. Well, apparently, from what I've heard, and even talking to the Secretary of the Department of Labor and Training, they do have a staffing issue. They have some monetary issues that they have acknowledged that they're not properly addressing a lot of the claims that are being addressed to them, and even the fines, the maximum fine per per restaurant or
per violation
is only $500. So there's not really an incentive to not violate the law when it's such a minimum violation. So
thank you
a
very
minimum
much.
penalty.
Any questions for this young man? Thank you. The next witness.
Hi, hello. Good evening. My name is Ray Damaris. I work for the 99 Restaurants. I'm a director of operations. I'm a Rhode Islander. I live in Johnston, Rhode Island. I service restaurants in Rhode Island, but I also service restaurants throughout New England, in addition to New York. So I've seen firsthand, I can answer some of the questions that you asked earlier of how this really affects when it goes into play in different states. Unfortunately, we had to close 6 restaurants in Connecticut. And the bottom line was it just got too expensive to do business in the state of Connecticut. They pay their bartenders $7 change an hour, and that just doesn't fit into our business model. And I don't really think it matters if it's a Denny's or if it's a Sienna. There's a lot of people that go to Denny's, they're open 24 hours. There's a lot of people that go to Sienna, they're open sometimes, I think, from 4 to 10 at night. So the amount of hours that are available for people to work. So being in the wait staff business, as the gentleman from Sienna and the Luxburger said, was that the average wages for the 99 are $18 per hour to $25, depending on location. And as they said before, it will definitely hurt the restaurant business. I will have to take from the cooks that I pay currently $15 an hour and stop giving them raises that we give them, stop giving them advancements to pay waitresses that are making $18 to $25 an hour. And that's before we pay them $2.89. And just to go back, I will submit the rest of it in writing, but just to go back as far as there are bad bosses out there in any industry. And we heard a lot about sexual harassment today, and we heard a lot about people not being paid their minimum tip wake up. I could show you right on my phone every Monday, every one of my restaurants, all 105, get a report that says this is what your tip makeup is, this is what's going to be in their checks on this Friday, was there a mistake, was there an error, and that is as simple as just having a payroll company figure that out for you.
Thank you, Mr. Damaris.
Okay.
Any questions, Mr. Damaris? Representative Giarrusso.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I didn't know who you represented, but I was looking for a guy like you, because you're not Capriccios, you're not Trattoria Simpatico, you're not some of these other high-end restaurants. So I was wondering how, if we're drawing any kind of parallels here, haven't been to 99 Restaurant and haven't been to the other higher-end restaurants, there is one thing that I know for sure, is the table turnover is a completely different story. I mean, we might spend the whole night at her restaurant, but we might be in and out of yours in 45 minutes. So how does that, so what are your waitresses and waiters, and what do they typically make per hour? Do you have that data?
Yeah, depending on location, $18 to $25 an hour.
So they just have to wait on, the table turnover is just higher than it would be at Capriccios.
Yeah, plus they're, I would assume, and I'm just making an assumption, I've worked in fine dining, I've worked as a bartender and a waiter in this great city. I would assume that there's smaller station sizes in a Capriccios than there are at the 99. They can wait on 5 tables.
I've got and mine are 4.
And hers are 4. So yes, there's 45 minutes is the average table turn in our restaurant, so they do seat more people through. But it's a misconception that thinks, oh, that place is slammed. You see lines out the door that every restaurant owner is driving Ferraris and that they're rich. The margins are so tight. We are so price sensitive. We can't raise our menu prices, or you won't come to the 99 as often as you do. Or you won't go to Capriccios at all, because you'll find different dining options. When you go to the supermarket, how much more your grocery bill is compared to what it was before. And then with healthcare costs and everything on top of it, we just can't afford this right now. Every campaign that I've watched last year said we need to add jobs to Rhode Island. We need to add jobs. We cannot take a chance and take jobs away. I don't care what California's doing. I don't care what New York's doing. I care about the state I live in. I care about Rhode Island. And I know that if we implement this, Rhode Island is known for food. There's more restaurants per capita, don't quote me on that, in Rhode Island than there is in any other state. We all know that. If we take that chance and that gamble, we don't know where it's going to lead unemployment to. And for anybody to be sexually harassed in the restaurant business, Shame on them for allowing it. Leave and come work for me, because I'm a good guy and I'll treat you well, and I have a 40% turnover, so I'll make sure that they're treated well.
Thank you.
Thank you. Representative Vice Chair Palangio.
Yeah. Your comments were quite interesting because the gentleman who owns Sienna was saying his employees about $20 an hour, and yours is between 18 and 25. Who the 99? Who your clientele? Is it dollar amount annually? I mean, you must the 99. You must have like marketing strategy and who exactly your customers are.
Well, when the Red Sox win, kids eat free, so it's a different clientele there. But no, got a plug in there.
Is it like a blue collar, upper end blue collar guy?
We're a family restaurant, but we also to the power couples out there now. Those 35-year-olds that don't have kids that come in. You know, we have great food selection for everybody.
So the average annual salary of your customer is, you must know what that is. You just don't want to tell me.
Well,
what is your average customer
family? How about family? It's between $70,000 and $85,000 a year.
So it's upper. I would guess that's upper middle class.
Well, I wouldn't say that's upper middle class for a family anymore. If you try living on $65,000 for a family, it's not upper middle class.
And the turnover you said is what, about 45 minutes out on average?
Table turns are 45 minutes average, yes.
Right, and what is the average bill in that 45-minute period?
Per person averages $16 per person. Per person. That's our average. And in 1996, it was probably $9. So every time we get a menu price increase, whether we want to or we don't, the servers and bartenders get a raise. Every single time.
So every time price increases on the menu, the servers get an increase?
They get a raise because you're tipping 20% on the total bill. You don't say, hey, last week it was $8, this week it's $9, I'm going to tip them less.
You
tip them more.
Did your restaurant, didn't they close some restaurants in Rhode Island as well?
Yeah, closed 2 restaurants, North Providence and Warwick, a few years back.
And the restaurants that, and I'm not picking on your restaurant, I'm just using it as an example. You think the restaurants that closed in Connecticut was somewhat based on the increase in the minimum wage?
It's too expensive to do business in there, so you have to do a certain unit volume to survive. You have to do mass and numbers. You know, Capriccio's does numbers, large checks. We have to do it by pushing people through the door consistently and providing the same great service and the same friendly smiles as everybody else. But make no doubt about it, you know, our wait staff works hard. And there's laws in place to say that they can't be doing hourly functions or minimum wage functions for certain amounts of time. Those laws are all in place. If owners choose not to obey those, then you can't punish the rest of us because somebody spent 2 hours carrying kegs. That wouldn't happen in my restaurant. And if they did, they would be paid for it.
In restaurants that are in perhaps southern Rhode Island and northern Connecticut, is there a price difference in the same items on the menu?
Beverage price. We had to take a beverage price increase, and there's a lot of chains that do take small modifications, but because we're just Northeast company, we didn't feel like we could take anything but beverage.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Representative Chippendale.
To follow up on Rep. Palangio's point, I live in Foster. I live about a half a mile from the Connecticut border, and I do frequently eat there. And yes, the prices are higher. And 99 is a restaurant that in Dayville, there is one there.
Killingly, yes.
Killingly, yes. And yes, the prices are universally higher, and even from diners to fine dining, and I can tell you that from experience. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, all three of you. Appreciate it. Complete page 2. We have 9 pages to go, so I want people to understand where we are. There are 3 people who signed up, not to testify, but just to give written testimony. Janet Russell, Greg Spiro, Rita Draper, and they're all against the bill. Also against the bill is Stephen Draper, Joanne Carlson, and Julie Fuller. For the bill, Andy Posner. Andy Posner, if you're here, please come forward. Mary Kay Harris. Mary Kay Harris from the Providence City Council. Excuse me. Ashney Schnofield. Ashney. Jim Steinfeld. Bill LeBron.
Excuse me.
Bill LeBron. Jamie Rhodes. Jamie Rhodes. Kirsten Dart or Dirt. Okay. I'm sorry? Okay. Well, thank you. I appreciate that because I have not had dinner yet. And all this talk of all this good food has made me very hungry tonight. And we're approaching 8 o'clock, but thank you for that, Representative. Jose Batista. Jose Batista. Senator Miller, would you like to testify? You're more than welcome. Sit down. Let me just get you some seatmates. Teresa Hillman. Teresa Hillman. Karen Griffin. I'm sorry. Karen Griffin. Dan Wooden. Dan Wooden. Steve Rudolph. Frank Peace.
Going right through these
That
pages.
concludes page 3. I just want to call these people, Senator, and I'll have you speak. Because if they're waiting, I have them come up. Lee Ann Byrne. Paul McDonald. I think he testified already. He signed up twice. Gus Oot. Justin Kelly. Robert Hill. Kathleen Fontaine. I can't read this. Can you guys help me?
Georgette Dean. Georgette.
Yes. Georgette?
Yes.
Come forward. Georgette Pierce. Georgette, your handwriting is a challenge. Thank you. Senator Miller, welcome. It's always nice to see a counterpart from the Senate here. Welcome to House Labor, Senator.
Welcome. I'll be brief.
Thank you.
As I think my reputation precedes me, and it would be no surprise to any of you in my 9th year in the State House that there hasn't been a minimum wage bill that I didn't love until today, until this bill. I was actually nominated to be on the National Restaurant Association board, and they looked elsewhere because of my stand in support of the increase of minimum wage. But this bill takes important revenue away from some of my most valued staff, which is my wait staff. And I have 3 restaurants with over 80 servers.
And they're 3 excellent restaurants, by the way. I've eaten at all 3 of them.
The servers for every restaurant that I have would make less money under this bill. I now, as an employer, am obligated to make sure that they make the minimum wage. No matter what their tips are on any given night, I have to make sure that they make the minimum wage. And to say that this isn't enforced is absurd. We had a U.S. labor audit at one of our restaurants within the last month, and they found little or no violation. If there were violations, they were technical. And they told me that they were going to, within the next few years, as a U.S. Department of Labor, with this as part of their responsibility to make sure everybody is paid minimum wage and overtime, that every restaurant in the state within the next few years will be audited by the U.S. Department of Labor. So to say that this isn't properly enforced is absurd.
Senator, I respect you the 9 years that you've been here, but also as a businessman, and your restaurants are always first class.
Thank you.
We heard testimony about sexual harassment and unfair labor practices. And my question to you as a business owner, if we raised the sub-minimum wage just $1, would those, or even $2, maybe not as high as Representative Arenberg's bill is, but if we raised it somewhere in the middle, would those problems go away?
I
Do they
don't see
exist?
how we can have a conversation about minimum wage and at the same time have a conversation about sexual harassment. They are two topics. Both violating minimum wage law is highly illegal. Sexual harassment is highly illegal. That both need to be enforced rigorously, and they should not be discussed in the same testimony. It's the responsibility of a restaurant owner to enforce both laws.
Thank you, Senator. We appreciate you coming over to the House. We always welcome you.
Thank you.
The next witness, and then Georgette. The gentleman first. He was before you, and then you. Thank you.
My name is Justin Kelly, and I regret that I'm testifying in opposition to Senator Miller, and I hope that it won't happen frequently. I just want to say two things briefly, and I don't mean to speak against the senator, but I think that unfortunately the reality is many businesses are not run in the way that you run your businesses, and oftentimes I know from many, many people that I have met in my life, and family members of mine, friends, neighbors, it is very rare where someone has worked as a server and they get paid the minimum wage to make up for their week. And if the Department of Labor is coming in and auditing restaurants in Rhode Island, I would welcome that, and I think that the workers of Rhode Island who work in these restaurants would welcome that. So that's all I have to say on that piece. But I would say also that it's time to raise the wage in Rhode Island. Not just the minimum wage for all workers, but for tipped workers as well. 20 years is far, far too long. Business models change. This is something that's clear. Business models have changed throughout the course of history, from chattel slavery to child labor to working 16 hours a day. These things change. We adapt as a country. We adapt as a people. And I would ask the House to say now is the time for us to adapt here in Rhode Island. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Justin, can I ask you a question? It says you represent IUPAT. What is...
Development representative of the International Union of Painters and Allied Trades, Local 195, District Council 11.
Okay, I didn't know what the acronym was. That's all I'm asking for.
Absolutely.
Thank you very much. Any questions? Thank you. Georgette, you're up.
Thank you, Chair. I'm a local person, born and raised in Stonyville, and I too am Greek. I lived my big fat Greek wedding. I'm on both sides of my family-owned restaurants, and of course they've sold, and now I'm back in the industry. I think that more than anything, I don't want to pound this thing about gender and specifics, but basically I think it's a human rights issue, just to cover it pretty well. I don't care whether you're male or female, but that minimum wage needs to come up, because if I'm a professional, that's what I need and I require to live along with anyone else. I don't know if you've ever heard the saying that the doctor that came out at the bottom of his medical school, what do you call him?
A doctor.
Thank you.
They say the same thing about lawyers, I want you to know.
Know this. And police officers. But anyway, I just think it's a respect issue, and I felt so strongly about it that I wanted to come up and say I think it's a human rights issue. And if you feel that, what I feel is that your employees are the backbone of this golden goose. It really is. And I love this industry, and I'm proud of it. And Rhode Island is one of the best places for it. But it's just time that people need their due respect. And I think it's really that simple. If people feel respected, they're going to perform. And they'll feel more united to your cause. I adore everyone that's in this room. I've worked for everybody in this room.
He's worked for me.
I have. I have no problem.
And he works for one of my best friends, so, you know.
And I try to give them as best I can. But I just want to make a statement today and let you know that I think it should be considered on both sides and that we should sit down together and find a way to do this. Thank you.
Thank you. Georgette, I'd like to say something. I've been here now for 5+ hours, and you gave the most compelling testimony of anybody. You didn't belittle anyone. You spoke from the heart, and I appreciate that, and I just wish more witnesses were like you. Yeah, you're the first person on any side that asked for compromise, as Representative Casey said to me. And that makes my job easy, and you restore my faith in a lot of what I heard today. So I want to thank you from the bottom of my heart, because I think you spoke from the bottom of your heart.
I do.
And I thank you.
I feel strongly about it, and I'm willing to talk to anyone.
And you waited. You waited here since 4:30, so I appreciate that, and that says a lot about you. So thank you very much.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. Thank you, Justin. Thank you. Okay, Rachel Flum or Flynn, I'm not sure. Juan Espanol, Bob Bacon, I'm sorry, Bob Bacon. Christopher Carlozzi, Liberty Goodwin, Donald Bayer, Rebecca Marshall, is that Marshall? McGill? Maybe it's McGill.
Something.
Rebecca, is there anybody here named Rebecca?
That's McGoldrick.
Thank you. Jesse Streaker. Casey Sardo. Lee Harmon. Grace Aiello. Diane Ritchie. The rest of the people on this list do not want to testify. They just signed up all against the bill, so I'll just read their names quickly. Ted Newcomer, Alicia Ferrati, James Piga, Carlo Slaughter. If I'm mispronouncing it, please forgive me. The handwriting is not good, and I'm not good with names anyway. Stephen Renzi, Carif Cello, Ben Cello, Nick Greenbach, Tammy Wilson, Jack Walrund, Michael Lester, Bahit Sharif, Bashat Sharif, thank you, Representative. Jane Eccleston, Jim Pavlon, Jack Capolino, Russell Morin, Leonard Panaggio. Mr. Bacon, I'm going to just bear with me until I get someone else to sit next to you. And I'll skip this for a minute because this whole sheet is people who signed up to testify against the bill. I can read this later. I just want to see if there's anyone else here to testify. Cassandra Brimmer. Shana Rossi. Sophia DeSantos. Patsy Wilson. Andre Gomez. Sam Bell. Come on up, Mr. Bell. Welcome. Steve O'Brien. Neil Kelly. Amy Beverly. Cassidy Wardwell. No, that's a Z. No. Wardwell. What's that? I can't.
David Frupp.
David?
Oh, Daniel Frupp.
Daniel? Katie Simlock. Jim Paolo. Robert Morse. Mike Mohegan. Steve Reeves. Jen Lester, Tyler Barron, Jack Walrond, Steve Salago, Jesse Raven. Let me ask this question. Is there anybody else who wants to testify here?
That's easy way to do it.
Okay, come up and state your name. And Mr. Bacon, go ahead. And then we'll just go from there because I think we're close to the end today. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Welcome, Mr. House Leader, Mr. Bacon.
Thank you. Thank you, members of the committee. Thank you for having the patience to sit and listen to the testimony tonight. We all appreciate it. I have to tell you that I'm sitting here right now dismayed because I discovered tonight that for 40 years, with 3 different companies in 3 different states, I've run businesses by the law because I thought the U.S. Department of Labor, the Division of Labor and Training, and the EEOC would be there to squelch me if I did something wrong. And tonight I find out that they totally don't exist and don't patrol our industry, which obviously I'm being sarcastic. They do a very good job. And all the things that were talked about tonight, whether it be sexual harassment or whether it be paying less than a minimum wage, are very serious offenses, and companies across the nation have been fined significant dollars. Much of the testimony that you heard tonight was riddled with information provided by Restaurant Opportunity Center, as you know. And I won't get into it now, but we will send you some information if you'd be kind enough to review it that questions the methodology that they used in their surveys and their testing and brings to light that some of the information may not be as applicable as you think it is. Representative Regenberg talked about comparing us, that we've got to keep up with the states around us. I agree. I think we should keep up on an economic scale. If you look at the rankings, we're ranked in the bottom in some pretty bad categories. Population growth, worst place for business, 3rd in net migration out of the state. Those are all things that we need to reverse together. We need to work together. And if we want to be like the other states, let's be like them first economically, and then let's look at the cost side. Let's not make it harder to do business so we won't catch up to them ever. Let's work together on that. I think that there seems to be a lot of people from other states that want to come and testify, so maybe we can get some people to come and testify on the economic side of things and help us out here a little bit. Servers in our state make a self-reported $12.12 an hour. That's 35% more than the minimum wage. People tonight saying that that servers haven't received a raise in 20 years, it's just false. On a national level, since 1999, server wage rates based on the U.S. Census Bureau went from 714 to 1313. That's an 84% increase since 99, or 5.7% a year. I don't know many other industries or jobs that claim 5.7 increases per year from 1999.
Thank you, Mr. Bacon. That's the 2 minutes. Are there any questions for Mr. Bacon? Thank you very much. Mr. Bell, and then that young lady.
Good evening, Chairman Shikarchi and members of Labor who've been willing to stick it out this long. Thank you.
And thank you for coming this long as well.
Always. My name is Sam Bell. I live in Providence, and I'm here to represent the Rhode Island Progressive Democrats. Our mission is to support the progressive values and policies of the National Democratic Party and to encourage Rhode Island Democrats to enact them here. We're thrilled to see Rhode Island answering President Obama's call to raise the minimum wage to $10.10, and we would especially like to thank Representative Bennett for his very hard work to make the President's vision a reality here in our state. But the President also included a raise for tip workers in his minimum wage proposal, and we believe it is essential for Rhode Island to respond to the President's call by giving tip workers a raise. That is why we are so pleased that Representative Regenberg is introducing this bill to give tip workers a raise. For my testimony today, I'd like to read from President Obama's policy paper, The Impact of Raising the Minimum Wage and Ensuring a Robust Tip Minimum Wage. Since 1991, the federal minimum wage has declined by 40% in real terms. This relates to the federal minimum wage, but it emphasizes my point, which is the National Party's support for raising the tip wage. Today, the tip minimum wage equals just 29% of the full minimum wage, the lowest share since the tip minimum wage was established in 1966. When surveyed, more than 1 in 10 workers in predominantly tipped occupations report hourly wages below the full federal minimum wage, including tips. This fact highlights the challenges of ensuring compliance with minimum wage laws for tip workers. Currently, 32 states, including the District of Columbia, require employers to pay tip workers an hourly wage that exceeds the federal tip minimum of 213, and 7 of those states require employers to pay both tipped and non-tipped workers the same state minimum wage for 4 tips. Raising the full minimum wage and the tip minimum wage will help reduce poverty among women and their families, as well as make progress towards closing the gender pay gap. I hope Rhode Island answers the President's call and gives struggling tip workers a raise. Thank you.
Thank you. And I will tell you the same thing I've told other people, and Mr. Bacon as well, that if, even though we're trying to move things along, if you have more comments, please submit them in writing. Miss, if you don't mind, I just don't know who you are, so I'd ask you to identify yourself, please.
Sure. My name is Valerie Leduc.
You're going to use the microphone, Valerie. Just tell us if you're testifying for yourself or you're testifying for an organization.
Well, I'm testifying primarily for myself, but I also work in the industry, so I will be bringing in some numbers at the very end of what I have to say.
Okay, you got a
I thought I did. I'm sorry. Okay. I've been part of the tipped industry ever since my children were young. I was the main breadwinner in the family. I raised 3 children. I also put myself through school, starting at CCRI, Bryant University, graduate degree at URI, on a tipped wage, and as a part-timer. I know that the money is there. From the moment I stepped from a tipped employee to a management role, I took a pay cut, a pretty drastic pay cut, but it was what I wanted to do. In the intervening years since that's happened, I've also been given the opportunity from the Women's Food Service Forum, which is part of this industry nationally, to be the first recipient of a scholarship to Northwestern University Executive Leadership Program for Women. Are there bad employers in this industry? Sure. That's why there's rules and laws here to protect those employees. Considering a tipped minimum increase to even the minimum wage currently at $9 an hour is where I will tell you that my employer right now is Angelo's, a 91-year-old family restaurant that I'm sure you all know and love for its history. It's been awarded the SBA's Small Business Owner of the Year several years ago. I can tell you that our turnover rate is only about 17%. I can also tell you that given this increase, at our current sales, would cost 10% of our current sales. You heard earlier from a CPA that the restaurant industry only makes 2 to 5% on average. That's like adding another $1 minimum to every meal. This state just cannot afford that kind of increase at this time for its patrons. I really, truly, honestly believe that those kinds of increases in prices will deter folks from coming out and eating. Not to mention, for those that were mentioned, technology has come a long way, and we're seeing servers being replaced right now with technology all over the world. We raise this to that point, it will happen here. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you all. If you have any questions? I don't think so. They usually Anthony? Thank you, Representative. Is there anyone else, either in the Bell Room or the Overflow Room or here today, that has not testified that would like to? Then if there's no one else, that will conclude the testimony here today. What I'd just like to say, this is going at approximately 8:15, I want to thank everybody who came before the committee today to testify. That, as I stated in the beginning, that this bill has been held for further study with all bills, and I'm encouraging everybody to submit any comments. I know we kept everybody to about a 2 to 3 minute time limit, but if you want to make any other points, we will absolutely consider them. I thank everybody there, and to follow the words of Georgette, I would encourage the sponsor and some of the people who are against the bill to maybe sit down and talk and see if there's a middle ground to come through. I thank you, and that concludes House Labor tonight. I take a motion to adjourn. A motion was moved by Vice Chair Pelangio, seconded by Representative Casey and Chippendale. All those in favor say aye. Aye. And the hearing is concluded today. Thank you all, and thank you, staff, for staying so late tonight.